In this video, we're ranking SpongeBob's greatest episodes across 3 hours of non-stop classics. Let's begin. First up, we got Sailor Mouth from Season 2 of SpongeBob SquarePants, stands as one of the show's most memorable episodes. The episode originally aired on the 21st of September 2001 and drew 2.88 million viewers. This particular episode tackles the subject of profanity in a way that remains clever and funny for both children and adults watching together. The episode takes place primarily at the Krusty Krab and around Bikini Bottom. At this point in the series, SpongeBob has been working as a fry cook for Mr. Krabs for some time, and the show has established the core dynamic between SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs. Season 2 represents SpongeBob at its creative peak, with the writers finding the perfect balance between silly humor and surprisingly thoughtful storytelling. The show had already proven itself as more than just a kids' cartoon, with episodes that could entertain multiple age groups at once. Sailor Mouth continues this trend by taking a topic that parents often struggle to explain to children and turning it into comedy that works on multiple levels. The story begins at closing time at the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krab stands by the door and calls closing time the worst time of the day, cringing as he flips the sign from open to closed. SpongeBob prepares to leave for the day, but Mr. Krabs stops him by grabbing his face and pulling him back inside. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to take out the trash before he goes. Squidward holds up a garbage bag with flies buzzing around it. SpongeBob makes an innocent joke, thinking Mr. Krabs was insulting Squidward by calling him filth, but Squidward clarifies that Mr. Krabs means the actual garbage bag. SpongeBob takes the trash outside, singing a little song about taking out the trash as he walks to the dumpster. When SpongeBob reaches the dumpster, he notices writing on the side of it. He reads the graffiti out loud, calling it dumpster writing and the voice of the people. The messages include phrases like up with bubbles, down with air, and nematodes are people too, which makes SpongeBob laugh. He finds one incomplete message that reads Squidward smells, and SpongeBob innocently finishes it by writing the word good after it. Then he spots another piece of graffiti that reads Krabs is A, followed by a word that gets censored by a dolphin chirp sound. SpongeBob reads this word out loud without understanding what it means. A garbage man who happens to be walking by hears SpongeBob say the word and responds with disgust, asking SpongeBob if he kisses his mother with that mouth. SpongeBob answers innocently that he does sometimes, but not recently. The garbage man picks up the trash bags and leaves, clearly offended. Patrick appears and greets both the garbage man and SpongeBob. SpongeBob asks Patrick if he knows what the word means. Patrick looks at the dumpster and reads Krabs, recognizing it as the name of the red, sweaty guy SpongeBob works for. SpongeBob clarifies that he does not mean that word, but rather the other word written after it. Patrick reads the censored word out loud and claims he knows what it means. Patrick explains that the word is what he calls a sentence enhancer. He tells SpongeBob that people use these words when they want to talk fancy. According to Patrick, you just sprinkle the word over anything you say, and suddenly you have what he calls a spicy sentence sandwich. SpongeBob thinks he understands the concept and wants to try it out. He clears his throat and tells Patrick what a lovely day they are having, but inserts the censored word into the sentence. Patrick agrees and uses the word multiple times in his response. The two friends continue practicing their new sentence enhancer, saying the word back and forth to each other. SpongeBob comments that his lips are tingling from the spiciness of the conversation, and Patrick says his lips tingle too. They both laugh, with SpongeBob noting that it tingles when he laughs. The next day, SpongeBob arrives at the Krusty Krab for work. He opens the doors and greets the customers, telling them what a nice day they are having while inserting the censored word. All the customers stop eating and stare at SpongeBob in complete shock. One fish named Harold gasps and asks if SpongeBob just said that word. A pirate customer confirms that he did. SpongeBob then greets Patrick, who is sitting at a table in the restaurant, using the word again in his greeting. Patrick responds by using the word as well. An elderly customer named Old Man Jenkins complains that he thought this was a restaurant, not a convention for people with foul mouths. SpongeBob continues by tapping on the microphone and making an announcement about the daily special. He describes the Krabby Patty in detail, but inserts the censored word multiple times throughout his description. He tells customers not to forget to ask them to do something to the fries, using the word again. The customers remain shocked by what they are hearing. One customer drops his patty, another stops chewing, causing his food to float in midair. A mother octopus tries to cover her children's ears to prevent them from hearing the profanity, but she runs out of tentacles and has to dump a cup of soda on one child's head. Squidward hears the announcement over the intercom, and a giant human ear pops out of his head before he pushes it back in. SpongeBob and Patrick continue greeting Squidward using the word. One customer comments that he does not understand why the talented guy has to work blue, meaning use crude humor. Another customer suggests they go somewhere more family-oriented. All the customers leave the Krusty Krab, grumbling and complaining. Some say they will never eat there again and call SpongeBob and Patrick foul-mouthed bottom feeders. The customer meter inside the Krusty Krab runs down to 0, setting off sirens and flashing red lights. Mr. Krabs is in the bathroom when he hears the sirens. He looks through a periscope and sees that the Krusty Krab dining room stands completely empty. He gasps in horror and runs to the dining room with toilet paper stuck to one of his legs. He yells for all hands on deck and shouts orders to batten the front door, stores, brace the cash register, and break out the happy snacks. He asks Squidward where all his beautiful paying customers have gone. Squidward explains that the two barnacle-mouthed brothers just learned a new word and SpongeBob said it over the intercom. Mr. Krabs demands to know what word SpongeBob said. Squidward tries to whisper it to Mr. Krabs, but Mr. Krabs cannot hear him the first time. After Squidward whispers again, Mr. Krabs gasps in shock. Mr. Krabs calls SpongeBob and Patrick to come front and center. He tells them he should make them paint the entire Krusty Krab for using such language. SpongeBob protests that they were only using their sentence enhancers. Patrick agrees, calling it fancy talk. Mr. Krabs firmly states that there is nothing fancy about that word. SpongeBob asks if he means the specific word in question, saying it again. Mr. Krabs confirms that yes, that is the word, and orders them to stop saying it. He tells them it is a bad word. Both SpongeBob and Patrick react with horror when they learn it is a bad word, and they both wipe their tongues while moaning in regret. Mr. Krabs explains that the word they have been using is bad word number 11. He goes further and tells them that there are 13 bad words they should never use. Squidward interrupts to ask if Mr. Krabs does not mean there are only 7 bad words. Mr. Krabs responds that there are only 7 bad words normally, but not if you are a sailor. Then he laughs. SpongeBob expresses amazement that there are 13 bad words. Patrick uses the word again while commenting that 13 is a lot of bad words. Mr. Krabs makes both boys promise they will never use that word again. SpongeBob and Patrick both promise. Later that day, SpongeBob and Patrick are at SpongeBob's house playing a board game called Eels and Escalators. SpongeBob comments that he feels glad Mr. Krabs told them the word they were using was a bad word. Patrick agrees and says that classy sophisticates like them should not stain their lips with cursing. SpongeBob agrees, using slightly fancy language himself. He suggests they play a nice, wholesome game of eels and escalators. Patrick gets excited and flops his arms up and down like a seal, calling it his favorite game. SpongeBob rolls the dice, saying that Gary needs a new pair of shoes. Patrick looks at the dice and says SpongeBob got eels, meaning it is too bad because SpongeBob has to ride the eel backward on the board. SpongeBob says darn and moves his game piece to an eel space. Patrick takes his turn and rolls the dice, getting escalators. He laughs excitedly as he moves his piece up the board. SpongeBob takes his turn, hoping for escalators, but gets eels again. Patrick rolls again and gets escalators once more. SpongeBob grows increasingly frustrated as he keeps rolling eels while Patrick keeps getting escalators. Patrick tells SpongeBob this is his last chance, and if he gets eels again, he loses the game. SpongeBob gets more and more frustrated as he rolls the dice. He keeps saying escalators over and over, hoping to get that result. The dice lands on escalators at first, and SpongeBob celebrates, but then the dice flips over to show eels instead. Patrick confirms that it landed on eels. SpongeBob gets so frustrated that the censored word slips out of his mouth. He immediately covers his mouth, realizing what he just said. Patrick reacts by saying, "Ooh," and pointing out that SpongeBob said number 11. SpongeBob tries desperately to explain himself, babbling and stuttering. He tells Patrick he did not mean to say it, that Patrick has to understand he was trying to explain something, and that some things just slip out. Patrick tells SpongeBob not to worry and says he understands. There is a brief pause. Then Patrick suddenly shouts Mr. Krabs' name and runs out the door, heading toward the Krusty Krab to tell on SpongeBob. SpongeBob chases after Patrick, screaming his name. When SpongeBob catches up to Patrick, he begs Patrick not to tell Mr. Krabs what happened. Patrick argues that SpongeBob said the word, and in the process of arguing, Patrick says the word himself. He covers his mouth as soon as he realizes his mistake. SpongeBob points this out triumphantly, declaring that now he will tell Mr. Krabs on Patrick. Patrick says he will tell first. SpongeBob brags that he can run faster than Patrick and starts laughing, but Patrick manages to hop onto the back of an ice cream truck that drives past. Patrick laughs at SpongeBob from the back of the truck, saying he will see him at the Krusty Krab. However, the truck turns left instead of going toward the Krusty Krab, and Patrick yells out in dismay. SpongeBob laughs as he barges into the Krusty Krab, calling for Mr. Krabs repeatedly. Mr. Krabs asks what SpongeBob wants, responding to his urgent tone. SpongeBob tries to tell Mr. Krabs about Patrick, saying Patrick's name 3 times. Mr. Krabs asks, yes, what about Patrick? SpongeBob starts to explain what Patrick said. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to out with it. SpongeBob talks very fast, explaining that he and Patrick were playing eels and escalators, and Patrick was going up while SpongeBob had to ride the eel, and then they ran, and Patrick said some things. Mr. Krabs leans in close and asks what kind of things Patrick said. SpongeBob explains that Patrick said a certain word that Mr. Krabs told him not to say, and this particular word happens to be number 11 inches the list of 13 words that should not be said. Mister? Krabs looks confused and asks SpongeBob to clarify the part about who did what. At that moment, Patrick walks into the Krusty Krab eating an ice cream cone. He throws the cone away and calls for Mr. Krabs repeatedly. Both SpongeBob and Patrick start talking at once, both claiming that the other one said the word he should not have said. They babble on about the word, with SpongeBob at one point mentioning number 13 instead of 11. The two eventually just point at each other and yell gibberish. Mr. Krabs has to grab both their lips to quiet them down. Mr. Krabs tells them he will let go of their lips, and when he does, he wants them to calmly tell him what they need to tell him. He asks if they understand. Both SpongeBob and Patrick nod and say yes. Mr. Krabs lets go of their lips, which initially deflate like balloons before reinflating to normal. As soon as their lips are back to normal, both SpongeBob and Patrick point at each other and say that the other one said the censored word, Mr. Krabs shrieks and asks if his ears are deceiving him. He tells them they should both be ashamed and says it is time to take out the trash. He picks up both SpongeBob and Patrick by their pants and carries them outside the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs tells them they need to be taught a lesson. He thought he made it clear that they should never use number 11 or any of the 13 bad words. He tells them to wait right where they are because he will be back. Mr. Krabs walks back inside the Krusty Krab, leaving SpongeBob and Patrick standing outside. Both of them shake with anxiety. Patrick asks what will happen to them. SpongeBob predicts they will probably get 40 lashes as punishment. Patrick reacts with fear and imagines himself blinking with 40 thick eyelashes attached to his eyes. SpongeBob apologizes to Patrick and says Mr. Krabs is right about not needing to use words like that. Patrick apologizes too. SpongeBob suggests they make a vow that from this day forward, a foul word will never pass their lips again. He says they will be good citizens just like good old Mr. Krabs. Patrick agrees and shakes hands with SpongeBob to seal their vow. Mr. Krabs returns carrying a ladder and several paint cans. He tells the two foul mouths that as punishment for fouling the air in his restaurant with their foul words, they will give the Krusty Krab a fresh coat of paint from top to bottom. As Mr. Krabs finishes explaining their punishment, he accidentally jams his foot on a rock. He starts hopping on one leg in pain, and a stream of censored profanity comes out of his mouth. The words get censored by dolphin chirps, boat horns, seal barks, seagulls, foghorns, ship bells, and various other aquatic animal sounds and nautical noises. While Mr. Krabs continues cursing, SpongeBob and Patrick count each bad word he uses. They count 5, 6, 7, and continue as Mr. Krabs keeps going. At one point, SpongeBob's alarm clock sound effect plays. By the end, SpongeBob holds up 13 fingers to show that Mr. Krabs has used all 13 bad words. SpongeBob gasps and tells Patrick they are going to tell Mr. Krabs' mother. Mr. Krabs immediately panics and begs them not to tell his mommy. He says he does not think her little old heart can take it. SpongeBob and Patrick laugh as they run toward Mama Krabs' house, with Mr. Krabs chasing after them and pleading with them not to tell his mother. They all arrive at Mama Krabs' house, which is shaped like a giant pink anchor. SpongeBob and Patrick bang on the door repeatedly, calling for Mama Krabs. She opens the door and greets them warmly. All three of them start explaining what happened at the same time, talking over each other. As they explain, they all end up using the censored words multiple times, with each word getting bleeped by various sound effects. SpongeBob points at Patrick and Mr. Krabs while explaining who said what. Patrick cries and keeps saying it was terrible. Mr. Krabs angrily calls them liars. They continue talking over each other, all using multiple censored words in their explanations. When they finish, Mama Krabs looks shocked and says, "Oh dear." Before commenting about her poor old heart, she then faints dramatically. Mr. Krabs gasps and rushes to his mother, asking what these foul-mouthed heathens have done to her. While he expresses concern, he also takes a coin out of her pocket. He tells SpongeBob and Patrick they should be ashamed for making an old lady faint with their sailor talk. Mama Krabs recovers and tells all of them they should be ashamed. She says that if they are going to talk like sailors, then they are going to work like sailors. The scene transitions to show SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs painting Mama Krabs' house, while Patrick paints the sand nearby. Mama Krabs comes outside and tells the boys they have earned a glass of lemonade. She laughs in a style similar to the cartoon character Popeye. As she walks, she stubs her foot on a rock and yells out in pain. Her words get censored by a loud klaxon horn sound. SpongeBob and Patrick gasp in shock at what she appears to have said. Mr. Krabs looks shocked and says "mother" in a scandalized tone, but Mama Krabs clarifies that she was not cursing at all. She was simply referring to Old Man Jenkins and his jalopy car. At that moment, Old Man Jenkins drives by in his loud, old car and greets Mama Krabs, honking his horn. The horn makes the exact same sound that had censored Mama Krabs' words, revealing that she had actually just been saying Old Man Jenkins and his jalopy the whole time. Everyone realizes the misunderstanding, and they all laugh together as the episode ends. The episode succeeds because it finds a creative way to address profanity without ever actually using real curse words. The censorship sounds become part of the joke itself. The twist ending where Mama Krabs turns out to not be cursing at all provides a perfect conclusion that rewards viewers who paid attention. The episode also shows hypocrisy in a way children can understand, as Mr. Krabs punishes SpongeBob and Patrick for doing exactly what he himself does moments later. The episode aired during a time when SpongeBob was at its creative peak, and it remains one of the most remembered episodes from the entire series. Parents appreciated that it gave them a way to talk to their children about inappropriate language while still being entertaining to watch together. The episode demonstrates why SpongeBob SquarePants became more than just a kids' show and earned its place as a cultural phenomenon that appealed to viewers of all ages. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Frankendoodle from Season 2 of SpongeBob SquarePants remains one of the show's most creative and memorable episodes. The episode originally aired on the 21st of January 2002 and drew 5.25 million viewers in the United States. This episode demonstrates the show's ability to create compelling stories from simple premises and shows why Season 2 is often considered the golden age of SpongeBob SquarePants. The episode takes a basic concept about a magic pencil and turns it into an adventure that combines humor with surprisingly intense moments. The episode begins with the French narrator observing an artist at sea. The narrator describes the artist's struggle and notes that inspiration appears to have struck. The artist, who would later be identified as voiced by Doug Lawrence, hums while working on his art. He kisses his pencil before continuing to draw, clearly feeling inspired by whatever he creates. However, disaster strikes when he accidentally throws his pencil into the ocean. The artist searches frantically for the pencil in the water, calling out for it and saying no repeatedly. The French narrator then delivers the episode's first lesson, stating that the artist has learned the first lesson of the sea, which is to always bring a spare pencil. The artist screams no in despair as the pencil sinks deeper into the water and eventually disappears from sight. The scene cuts to underwater Bikini Bottom, where the pencil continues falling through the ocean. SpongeBob and Patrick are playing a game together, specifically blowing bubbles in the shape of rock, paper, and scissors. SpongeBob tells Patrick to get ready and starts counting. SpongeBob says 1, Patrick says 2, and they both say 3 together. SpongeBob blows a scissors-shaped bubble, while Patrick blows a paper-shaped bubble. SpongeBob announces that scissors beats paper, and they both laugh at the game. They prepare for another round, with SpongeBob counting 1 and both of them saying 2 together. After they both say 3, they both blow paper-shaped bubbles this time. SpongeBob asks Patrick why he always does paper. At that exact moment, the falling pencil pops both of their paper bubbles and lands in the sand right between them. Both SpongeBob and Patrick scream in terror and run around in panic before hiding behind SpongeBob's pineapple house. Patrick asks SpongeBob what that thing is. SpongeBob observes that it looks like a giant pencil. Patrick tells SpongeBob to go touch it. SpongeBob extends his arm out toward the pencil and touches it to confirm what it is. He announces that it is indeed a giant pencil and grabs it, suggesting they draw some giant pictures with it. Patrick asks what SpongeBob is drawing. SpongeBob tells Patrick to stand back because he cannot draw with Patrick breathing down his neck. Patrick makes a dismissive sound and says artists in a mocking tone. SpongeBob announces that he is drawing a jellyfish. Patrick comments that it is pretty good, but criticizes the drawing by saying it lacks basic construction, and that SpongeBob's perspective leaves a lot to be desired. SpongeBob responds that everybody is a critic. Something remarkable happens next. The jellyfish drawing suddenly comes to life and starts swimming away while making buzzing sounds. Patrick excitedly tells SpongeBob that his drawing is coming to life. SpongeBob responds sarcastically, saying that is more like it, and calling Patrick Mr. Critic. Patrick clarifies that he means the jellyfish is literally swimming away. SpongeBob asks Patrick if he knows what this means. Patrick guesses that it means SpongeBob's art can never hang in a museum. SpongeBob corrects him and says it means they found a magic pencil. Patrick responds that now all he needs is a magic mustache and all his dreams will have come true. SpongeBob laughs and says he can help with that, then draws a mustache on Patrick's face. Patrick declares that life is good. However, the mustache floats away from Patrick's face almost immediately. Patrick shrugs and says easy come, easy go as the mustache drifts towards Squidward's house. Inside his house, Squidward stands looking at himself in the mirror. He talks to his reflection, telling himself that if he had some hair, he would be the most gorgeous creature in the sea. He says he has looks and talent, and all he needs is a full head of hair. At that exact moment, the floating mustache comes in through Squidward's window and rests on top of his head like hair. Squidward does not realize where it came from and simply admires his new look. Meanwhile, outside, Patrick announces that it is his turn to use the pencil. SpongeBob warns Patrick to be careful, explaining that being an artist is a heavy responsibility. He tells Patrick that each work of art is like a child and must be treated as such. Patrick dismisses this serious talk and says he was just going to draw a cartoon. SpongeBob changes his tone immediately and says, okay, then asks why Patrick did not say so in the first place. He hands the pencil to Patrick. Patrick draws a very crude picture. The drawing looks extremely rough and simplistic, showing a figure with the small stature of a jellyfish and a waving fist. SpongeBob looks at the drawing and says it is another jellyfish. Patrick corrects him and says it is Squidward. The badly drawn version of Squidward suddenly comes to life and grumbles at them. SpongeBob comments that it looks kind of creepy when it moves. Patrick agrees, saying ew, and acknowledging that SpongeBob is right. The badly drawn Squidward, which the transcript refers to as Jellyfish Squidward, starts walking away from them. SpongeBob declares that they cannot let him go into town. Patrick solves the problem by erasing the drawing while it screams. After erasing it, Patrick says poor Squidward with some sympathy in his voice. SpongeBob makes a sound indicating he just got an idea, saying his brain just hatched one. He draws a dollar bill on Squidward's green doormat, with the dollar attached to a string. SpongeBob laughs while drawing this prank. He says this is going to be classic. The scene shows Squidward getting dressed up nicely, telling himself he fancies a stroll around the park. SpongeBob rings Squidward's doorbell. Squidward opens the door and asks what SpongeBob wants. Then he notices the dollar and says someone left him some money for a perm. SpongeBob and Patrick snicker quietly as they watch. Squidward says, "Come to Harry," as he reaches for the money. SpongeBob pulls the string, causing Squidward to fall over. The mustache falls off Squidward's head as he hits the ground. Squidward yells "ow" and calls out SpongeBob's name. He sees the mustache floating away and yells about his hair, calling for SpongeBob again. Squidward goes back inside his house and slams the door shut. Patrick and SpongeBob laugh while hopping up and down in celebration of their successful prank. They suddenly stop laughing. SpongeBob says he has another idea and declares it will be the ultimate prank. He explains that he will draw himself, and when Squidward answers the door, it will not actually be the real SpongeBob. He draws a doodle version of himself, while Patrick laughs at the idea. The drawing stands up on its own. SpongeBob looks at it affectionately and says it is like a doll, but notes that all it needs is a tie. He draws a tie on the doodle version. He declares it ready for action. The SpongeBob doodle, referred to as Doodle Bob in the transcript, immediately starts shouting nonsense and runs towards Squidward's house. SpongeBob and Patrick laugh as they watch. Patrick narrates that Doodle Bob is going to the door. Doodle Bob knocks on Squidward's door. SpongeBob continues narrating, saying Doodle Bob is knocking on the door and that Squidward is answering the door. However, what happens next shocks SpongeBob. Doodle Bob picks up Squidward, holds him upside down, and repeatedly pounds his head on the ground. Patrick remains amused by this, while SpongeBob looks horrified. Squidward keeps yelling ooh and ow as his head hits the ground over and over. Patrick laughs and points out that Doodle Bob is beating up Squidward. Patrick and SpongeBob continue watching as Doodle Bob slams Squidward back and forth violently. SpongeBob yells for Doodle Boy to stop, using the wrong name. Doodle Bob throws Squidward back into his house. Squidward yells whoa and ow as he lands. Doodle Bob then steals the magic pencil and runs away with it. Patrick states the obvious, pointing out that Doodle Bob has the pencil. SpongeBob asks himself what he has done and tells Patrick they have to find Doodle Bob. The scene transitions to SpongeBob and Patrick standing in a field with tall bushes. SpongeBob wonders where Doodle Bob could possibly be. Patrick suggests that maybe Doodle Bob is in that poorly drawn pineapple, pointing to a crude drawing of a pineapple house. SpongeBob tells Patrick to come on and they should go check it out. Patrick suddenly becomes scared and says he is not going in there, then hides in a bush. SpongeBob joins Patrick in the bush and tries to encourage him, saying he is right behind Patrick and they should take baby steps. They both stand up inside the bush, with one of Patrick's legs and one of SpongeBob's legs visible sticking out of the foliage. They walk toward the drawn pineapple together. SpongeBob says they are almost there. However, Doodle Bob draws a hole in the ground and both SpongeBob and Patrick fall into it, screaming as they crash at the bottom. Patrick asks what just happened. Doodle Bob appears above them and speaks complete nonsense, saying Niahoy, Mineye, Neyoyoy Minoy, Lady on Mamoy. SpongeBob tells Patrick to give him a boost up so he can climb out of the hole. Patrick asks if they cannot just stay down in the hole where it is safe. SpongeBob refuses and says he created this monster and he has to stop him. As SpongeBob tries to climb, a giant wrench drawn by Doodle Bob falls on Patrick's head. Doodle Bob says more nonsense words that sound like Neophinian. SpongeBob tells Patrick, "See what I mean?" Patrick responds in a dazed state, asking, "Where's the leak, ma'am?" Both try to climb up the hole again. But they watch as Doodle Bob draws a bowling ball from a rock. He rolls the bowling ball at Patrick, whose head transforms into a bowling pin shape out of shock. Patrick yells as the bowling ball hits him, transforming him into several bowling pins. A strike symbol appears in the air. The ball rolls into the hole and hits Patrick again, creating another strike symbol for a double strike. SpongeBob asks if Patrick is okay. Patrick responds from off-screen by simply saying Finland. Doodle Bob laughs and says more nonsense, including "Me hoi minoi," before running off into the distance. The scene transitions to show a coral rock wall and another field. SpongeBob whispers to Patrick that Doodle Bob is over there. Patrick responds that Doodle Bob is hideous and makes him sick just looking at him. Patrick describes the features that disgust him, listing big bulgy eyes, that square body, those 2 buck teeth, and that stupid tie. SpongeBob looks down at his own body, realizing Patrick is describing features that SpongeBob himself has. SpongeBob clears his throat to get Patrick's attention. Patrick blushes awkwardly and quickly clarifies that the tie looks good on SpongeBob specifically. SpongeBob points out that Doodle Bob is putting down the pencil, saying this is their chance. He tells Patrick that on the count of 3, they will jump out and surprise Doodle Bob. Patrick gets excited and asks if it is a surprise party and whether it is Doodle Bob's birthday. Before SpongeBob can answer, Doodle Bob breaks through the coral rock wall that SpongeBob and Patrick are hiding behind. Doodle Bob says more nonsense and grabs SpongeBob. SpongeBob yells for Patrick to do something. Patrick simply says happy birthday as if they were actually having a party. Doodle Bob throws SpongeBob, who screams as he flies through the air and lands with a thud far in the distance. Patrick gives Doodle Bob a round rock with 2 blades of seaweed growing on it, treating it like a birthday present. Doodle Bob responds by bashing the rock on his own head, making a clunking sound. Patrick says you're welcome as if everything went according to plan. Doodle Bob screams more nonsense and starts running for his life. However, SpongeBob stops him by appearing in front of him while holding the pencil in his face. SpongeBob tells Doodle Bob to hold it right there. He says he brought Doodle Bob into this world, and now he is going to take him out. SpongeBob asks if Doodle Bob has any last words. Doodle Bob speaks very fast nonsense that sounds like "Bee ha bala hala baba." SpongeBob stutters and asks what that was, saying he is sorry but he did not understand. Doodle Bob slows down his gibberish and says "Bee ha bala hala baba" while looking unamused. Doodle Bob then starts shouting more gibberish as SpongeBob begins erasing his face. Doodle Bob mutters some sounds and then hits a rock. SpongeBob tells Doodle Bob to hold still and that this is for his own good. SpongeBob erases Doodle Bob piece by piece, saying take that and this, repeatedly as he erases different parts. He keeps alternating between saying that and this until Doodle Bob has been completely erased. SpongeBob screams in victory and declares himself SpongeBob, destroyer of evil. Patrick tells SpongeBob to take it easy because it is just a drawing. SpongeBob calms down and says that takes care of that. Patrick agrees, saying done and done. SpongeBob and Patrick head home, believing the problem is solved. However, the episode reveals that one of Doodle Bob's arms survived the erasing. The arm creeps out from under the rock where the erasing took place. The scene cuts to nighttime. SpongeBob has just returned home and uses the magic pencil to draw additions to his bedroom. He draws a fancy-looking bedroom with a canopy for his bed. SpongeBob talks to Gary, saying Gary should have been there because it sure was exciting. He admits he kind of misses the little Doodle and says Doodle Bob was like a son to him. However, SpongeBob says he feels glad things are back to normal. He wishes Gary good night, calling him Sweet Prince. Gary wears a crown on his head and meows in response. SpongeBob also says goodnight to the magic pencil before falling asleep. Doodle Bob's surviving arm crawls into SpongeBob's house and heads upstairs. The arm goes to the bathroom first, taking what the transcript describes as a bathroom break. Finally, the arm sneaks up to SpongeBob's bed, grabs the magic pencil, and starts redrawing the rest of Doodle Bob's body. SpongeBob wakes up and sees the pencil moving. He asks the magic pencil what it is doing up, joking about whether it is drawing itself a glass of water. SpongeBob laughs at his own joke. Suddenly, Doodle Bob pops up at the edge of the bed. SpongeBob screams in shock and says Doodle Bob's name. He chuckles nervously and asks if there are no hard feelings between them. Doodle Bob draws 2 angry eyebrows on his face, making his intentions clear. Doodle Bob jumps on SpongeBob's bed while holding the pencil in a threatening way. SpongeBob screams in terror and asks what Doodle Bob thinks he is doing. Doodle Bob points at SpongeBob and says, "You Doodle, me SpongeBob," essentially claiming he is the real SpongeBob. SpongeBob screams and jumps out of the way as Doodle Bob starts using the eraser end of the pencil to erase SpongeBob's pillow. Doodle Bob chases SpongeBob downstairs while erasing parts of the house. Doodle Bob erases a door and then erases the back of SpongeBob's pants, revealing his butt. Doodle Bob makes a sound of surprise before erasing SpongeBob's butt as well. SpongeBob screams and warns Doodle Bob to be careful with the pencil, saying, "Who knows what will happen?" Doodle Bob erases SpongeBob's nose. SpongeBob makes a pun, saying "I knows" instead of "I know." Doodlebob continues erasing parts of SpongeBob's face and body while laughing at how SpongeBob looks. SpongeBob tells Doodlebob it is very funny, then says now it is his turn. SpongeBob and Doodlebob struggle over the pencil. During the fight, the pencil breaks into two pieces. SpongeBob ends up with the lead part and uses it to redraw himself back to normal. SpongeBob tells Doodlebob that it looks like this is a draw, making a pun about the situation. However, Doodlebob sharpens the wooden end of the pencil with his mouth, giving himself a sharp point. Now Doodlebob has both ends of the pencil as weapons. SpongeBob says Doodlebob has made his point, making another pun. SpongeBob declares it does not matter because he was voted most artistic in high school. As SpongeBob makes this claim, the lead piece flies out of his hand, crashes through the window, and hits Squidward outside. Squidward yells, "Ow," from off-screen and says SpongeBob is going to pay for that. SpongeBob reconsiders and says maybe he was actually voted most clumsy in high school instead. Doodlebob starts attacking SpongeBob again with the sharpened pencil. SpongeBob hides in a bookshelf. As Doodlebob approaches, he gets his left foot stuck in a piece of paper on the floor. Doodlebob makes a confused sound and looks down at the paper. He tries to get the paper off his foot. SpongeBob also makes a confused sound, then looks in a book he is holding. He sees something that gives him an idea and says, "Paper." Doodlebob manages to toss the pencil from his hand while trying to free his foot. SpongeBob calls out that there is a page for Mr. Doodle and traps Doodlebob inside his notebook. SpongeBob watches as Doodlebob becomes preserved as a flat drawing on the paper. The drawing of Doodlebob smiles from inside the notebook. The next morning, SpongeBob hangs the piece of paper with Doodlebob on his wall next to several other pictures, securing it with a pushpin. Patrick arrives and asks SpongeBob what all the ruckus was about. SpongeBob tells Patrick to take a look for himself. Patrick gasps when he sees the paper and says it is the evil Doodle. SpongeBob corrects him and says no, Doodlebob is not evil. SpongeBob puts on glasses and takes out a pipe to make himself look intellectual. He explains that Doodlebob was just a two-dimensional creature lost in their three-dimensional aquatic world, longing for a purpose. He blows bubbles from his pipe while explaining this. Patrick asks if that means Doodlebob is a drawing. SpongeBob confirms this is exactly right and asks Patrick to see how happy Doodlebob looks in the picture. Patrick looks at a different framed picture on the wall showing the real SpongeBob and says Doodlebob still looks kind of creepy. The scene cuts to outside where SpongeBob has drawn a diving board using the magic pencil. The pencil's two broken halves have been taped back together. SpongeBob addresses the pencil formally, saying its powers are too mighty for ocean dwellers. He declares he will send the pencil back to the Magic Kingdom where it came from. He asks Patrick if he is ready. Patrick confirms he is ready. SpongeBob drops the pencil into Patrick's mouth. SpongeBob then jumps from the diving board and lands on Patrick's belly, launching the pencil out of Patrick's mouth like a projectile. The pencil flies upward toward the surface of the ocean. The scene cuts to the real world above water, where the artist from the beginning sits curled up in a fetal position. The French narrator says they are rejoining the artist in a creative slump. The pencil finally reaches the surface and lands on the artist. The artist makes confused sounds and asks what it is. He looks and realizes it is his pencil. The artist jumps up gleefully and holds the pencil in his hand, excitedly saying it is his pencil. He excitedly says, "Here we go," as he tries to draw again. However, the pencil lead breaks as soon as it touches the paper. The artist breaks into tears at this final disappointment. The French narrator states the second most important rule for the artist at sea, which is to always bring a pencil sharpener. The artist screams no in despair as the episode ends. Frankendoodle succeeds as one of the best SpongeBob episodes because it takes a simple concept and builds it into something genuinely entertaining and creative. The episode works on multiple levels, with humor for both children and adults. Children enjoy the slapstick violence and the silly gibberish language Doodlebob speaks, while adults appreciate the creative premise and the clever wordplay. The phrase "me hoi minoy" that Doodlebob says became one of the most quoted lines from the entire series and remains popular in internet culture decades after the episode first aired. The episode also features surprisingly intense moments, particularly the scenes where Doodlebob attacks Squidward and later battles SpongeBob inside his house. The erasing scenes created genuine tension despite the show's typically lighthearted tone. The episode demonstrates why Season 2 is remembered as SpongeBob at its creative peak, when the writers could balance comedy with surprisingly compelling storytelling and create episodes that remain memorable years later. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to One Crab's Trash from Season 3 of SpongeBob SquarePants stands as one of the show's most memorable episodes about greed and irony. The episode originally aired on the 22nd of February 2002 and drew 3.85 million viewers in the United States. This episode showcases Mr. Krabs at his greediest while telling a story with a perfect twist ending that teaches viewers about the unpredictable nature of value and the dangers of obsession over money. The episode opens with Mr. Krabs setting up a yard sale in his front yard. He places a sign that reads, "Fine Antiques for Sale," in the grass. He then assembles a rug where he plans to display all his items. The French narrator speaks, saying this is a yard sale and reminding viewers of the old saying that one man's trash is another man's treasure. Mr. Krabs digs through his trash can and pulls out a broken razor. He looks at it with disgust and says disposable before adding phooey and putting it back. Mr. Krabs then grabs the entire trash can and dumps all the items in it onto his rug, treating literal garbage as the antiques he plans to sell. The French narrator observes that for Mr. Krabs, all trash is treasure. Mr. Krabs takes another trash can and dumps its contents onto the rug as well. He smells the foul odor coming from the pile and uses a fresh scent odor spray can to spray the pile of trash and make it smell cleaner. After spraying, he adds the spray can itself to the pile of items for sale. Mr. Krabs announces that he is open for business. A fish walks up to the stand and Mr. Krabs asks if he sees anything he likes. The fish picks up an umbrella and says he will give Mr. Krabs $1.50 for it. Mr. Krabs acts offended and says that amount is too low for the umbrella because it is an antique that belonged to a queen. He demands $10 for it. The fish responds with shock, repeating the price of $10. He opens up the umbrella and points out that it is full of holes. Mr. Krabs quickly invents a story, claiming it belonged to the Queen of Switzerland. The fish says, "A queen, you say," and pauses before catching himself. He tells Mr. Krabs to wait a second because Switzerland does not have a queen. Mr. Krabs backs down and addresses the fish as Mr. Bargain Hunter, offering a new price of $5. The fish agrees to the deal and hands money to Mr. Krabs before running off with his purchase. Mr. Krabs smells the money and says he loves the sweet smell of an all-day sucker, a phrase that refers both to the lollipop candy and to calling the customer a sucker for falling for his scam. A slurping sound can be heard in the background. SpongeBob appears with Patrick, and they are both licking lollipops. SpongeBob greets Mr. Krabs. Patrick asks what Mr. Krabs is doing while they both continue licking their candy. Mr. Krabs explains that he is having an antique sale and tells them to have a look around. SpongeBob grabs a plunger and shows it to Patrick, saying it looks pretty cool. Patrick observes that it looks like the toilet plunger he threw out yesterday. Mr. Krabs quickly snatches the plunger away from SpongeBob and insists it is not a toilet plunger. He claims the item is an antique and starts making up a story about what it actually is. He turns the rubber part of the plunger upside down and calls it a 17th century soup ladle. Patrick believes the story completely and expresses amazement, saying he was using his plunger wrong the whole time. He asks how much it costs. Mr. Krabs says $5. Patrick drops his lollipop on the ground and takes out his money, saying he only has $7. Mr. Krabs grabs all the money and announces they have a deal. Patrick congratulates himself, saying that Patrick Star is one smart shopper. He picks up his lollipop from the ground, which is now stuck to a pair of dirty underwear, and continues licking just the candy side without noticing or caring about the underwear. SpongeBob finds another item and expresses excitement about a neat soda-drinking hat. He gasps when he notices something special about it. He says it must have belonged to someone who was number one, explaining that there have only been a handful of number ones in the history of forever. Mr. Krabs agrees with SpongeBob and tells him that SpongeBob himself is one of those number ones. SpongeBob asks if this is really true. Mr. Krabs continues his sales pitch, saying the hat announces to everyone that the wearer is number one and that the wearer lets gravity do the drinking for them. He tells SpongeBob the hat was made for him and that SpongeBob was born to wear this hat. Mr. Krabs puts the hat on SpongeBob's head. SpongeBob giggles with joy at wearing the hat. Mr. Krabs comments that it is a perfect fit and calls SpongeBob son. SpongeBob hugs Mr. Krabs with genuine emotion and thanks him repeatedly for bringing them together, referring to himself and the hat. SpongeBob's eyes well up with joyful tears as he asks how he can ever repay Mr. Krabs for this gift. Mr. Krabs responds by asking for $10 as payment. SpongeBob reaches into his pocket and takes out some money, but he only has $5. Mr. Krabs says that if SpongeBob only has $5, then he supposes it is no deal and they cannot complete the transaction. SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs to wait and says he will be right back. SpongeBob zips home at super speed and searches for more money. He finds change in his couch, in some spare clothes in his closet, and in his piggy bank. SpongeBob runs back to Mr. Krabs with his findings. He tells Mr. Krabs that he found 68 cents, bringing his total to $5.68. SpongeBob suggests that maybe Mr. Krabs can take the remaining $4.32 out of his paycheck. He asks what Mr. Krabs says and sweats nervously while waiting for an answer. Mr. Krabs pretends to think about it, saying he does not know. After a pause, he agrees, but says he is only agreeing because SpongeBob looks so dashing in that hat. SpongeBob thanks Mr. Krabs enthusiastically. SpongeBob and Patrick walk away, with Patrick still licking his lollipop that has underwear stuck to it. Mr. Krabs tells them not to mention it and calls them boys. After they leave, Mr. Krabs chuckles to himself and calls them a couple of rubes, meaning he thinks they are naive fools who are easy to trick. A different fish approaches Mr. Krabs and asks if he is the purveyor of this curio stand, using fancy language to ask if Mr. Krabs runs this antique business. Mr. Krabs confirms that he is. The fish says he understands. Mr. Krabs is selling a rare novelty drink hat and holds up a picture of the exact hat that SpongeBob just bought. Mr. Krabs responds that he is fresh out of that item. The fish tells Mr. Krabs to let him explain something. The fish takes out some money and says he is prepared to give Mr. Krabs $500 for that drink hat. Mr. Krabs starts drooling and tries to say the number 500 but can only stammer the first syllable repeatedly. A third fish walks up to Mr. Krabs and tells the first fish to not be so fast. This third fish elbows the other salesfish out of the way and announces he will give Mr. Krabs $1,000 for such a hat. Mr. Krabs continues stammering and drooling at the thought of this money. A fish named Nat runs up to Mr. Krabs and announces he will give $100,000 in cash for the hat in question. Mr. Krabs starts drooling so much that he creates an actual river of drool. A fish named Fred rows upward along this drool river in a rowboat. Fred announces from his boat that he will give Mr. Krabs $1 million for that hat. The rowboat then drifts down the drool river that continues flowing from Mr. Krabs' mouth. Mr. Krabs immediately runs off to find the hat, leaving a trail of drool behind him on the ground. He yells SpongeBob's name as he runs. The scene cuts to show SpongeBob in his front yard, blowing bubbles while wearing his new hat and giggling happily. Mr. Krabs hides behind a rock and watches SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs talks to himself, saying there is SpongeBob with his $1 million hat. He says he has to get the hat back before SpongeBob finds out how much it is actually worth. SpongeBob talks to his hat, saying his bubble production has increased twofold. He thanks the hat, which he has named Hattie, and gently pats it. Mr. Krabs comes out from behind the rock and calls SpongeBob's name. SpongeBob greets Mr. Krabs and asks how the antique business is treating him. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to never mind that and says he needs to tell SpongeBob something. He says he did not want to say this in front of Patrick, but the hat makes SpongeBob look like a girl. SpongeBob asks innocently if he is a pretty girl. Mr. Krabs hesitates and tells SpongeBob that he is beautiful. A male fish walks by and looks at Mr. Krabs with a raised eyebrow, finding this conversation strange. Mr. Krabs notices the male fish looking and laughs awkwardly. SpongeBob laughs as well. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to give him the hat back. SpongeBob refuses and reminds Mr. Krabs that Mr. Krabs himself said SpongeBob was born to wear this hat. SpongeBob says he does not want to give it back and that he cannot part with the hat now, not after all they have been through together. A thought bubble appears, showing SpongeBob's memory of their time together. The memory shows SpongeBob receiving the hat from Mr. Krabs at the yard sale and sitting down a few feet away. SpongeBob thanks Mr. Krabs and says he will call the hat Hattie. SpongeBob then narrates that this memory was when Mr. Krabs first showed up, meaning their entire history together consists of just that one moment a short time ago. The thought bubble ends. Mr. Krabs gives up and says to forget it. He leaves but then comes back briefly to tell SpongeBob that he is not beautiful either before leaving again. SpongeBob looks close to tears and asks sadly if he is really not beautiful. The scene cuts to later where SpongeBob is still blowing bubbles and laughing when Mr. Krabs shows up carrying a bag of hats. Mr. Krabs greets SpongeBob and says he is just the man Mr. Krabs wanted to see. He asks if SpongeBob is still playing with that dumb old hat. SpongeBob confirms that he is. Mr. Krabs asks if SpongeBob is sick of that boring old hat yet. SpongeBob says, nope. Mr. Krabs asks if SpongeBob is even a little tired of that old piece of junk. SpongeBob responds with a negative sound. Mr. Krabs asks if SpongeBob is even a teensy tiny bit tired of it. SpongeBob says, nope, again. Mr. Krabs says that in that case, he guesses SpongeBob does not want to see what is in his bag. SpongeBob asks what is in the bag. Mr. Krabs announces that he has novelty hats and takes out a hat with a fan on top of it. He offers SpongeBob this air-conditioned hat and turns it on, causing it to blow air really hard directly in SpongeBob's face. SpongeBob responds that the hat seems a little dangerous. Mr. Krabs takes out a different hat that has a mixer on it. He calls it the juicer, and demonstrates by putting a carrot in it. The juicer spits out carrot juice. SpongeBob makes an interested sound. Mr. Krabs takes out another hat with the words Foxy Grandpa written on it. He shows this hat to SpongeBob, who laughs at it. Mr. Krabs makes his offer, asking what SpongeBob says about trading his silly hat for all of these hats combined. SpongeBob declines the deal and says he is sticking with Hattie. He thanks Mr. Krabs for the offer and leaves to go home. Mr. Krabs expresses surprise that the Foxy Grandpa hat did not work, thinking that one would get SpongeBob for sure. Mr. Krabs says he did not want to have to do this, but SpongeBob leaves him no other option. The camera zooms in close to Mr. Krabs' mouth as he announces his plan to scare the hat off of SpongeBob. The scene cuts to nighttime. SpongeBob is asleep in his bed while still wearing the soda drink hat. He blows bubbles in his sleep and snores. Outside the house, Mr. Krabs runs up to SpongeBob's window carrying a fishing pole and a notepad. He draws a ghost on a page of the notepad. Mr. Krabs laughs to himself and says this will scare SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs tears the page out of his notepad, attaches it to the fishing pole's hook, and throws the line into SpongeBob's window. He makes a haunting moaning sound to add to the scary effect. SpongeBob wakes up and gasps, saying there is a floating shopping list. The paper is backwards from SpongeBob's perspective, and the side he sees has the words Milk, Eggs, Cheese written on it. SpongeBob screams when he sees this. Mr. Krabs realizes his mistake and says he is not a shopping list. He turns the paper around to show the ghost drawing on the other side and announces that he is a ghost. SpongeBob screams again at seeing the ghost. Mr. Krabs laughs evilly and tells SpongeBob to listen to him. SpongeBob asks in fear how the ghost knows his name and demands to know who the ghost is. Mr. Krabs announces that he is the ghost of soda drink hats and hangs down another piece of paper with a drawing of SpongeBob's specific soda drinking hat. Mr. Krabs says he is here to tell SpongeBob that the soda drinking hat he possesses is cursed. SpongeBob repeats the word cursed with shock. Mr. Krabs confirms it is cursed and explains that the hat once belonged to some guy who is dead now. SpongeBob asks what guy Mr. Krabs is talking about. Mr. Krabs has to make up a name on the spot and says the name is Smitty something. SpongeBob asks Smitty what, wanting the full name. Mr. Krabs has to invent more of the name and says Smitty Werben Jaegerman Jensen, creating an absurdly long name. SpongeBob concludes that this person must have been number one. Mr. Krabs agrees but adds that he was number one in Boogieland, trying to make it sound scary. Mr. Krabs continues the story, saying that a curse will descend on SpongeBob unless he returns that hat to its owner immediately. SpongeBob repeats the word immediately as a question. Mr. Krabs confirms immediately. SpongeBob asks if he needs to return it to its owner. Mr. Krabs is starting to lose patience, but confirms yes. SpongeBob asks if he means right now. Mr. Krabs says yes twice and repeats that the hat must be returned to its owner right now. SpongeBob suddenly appears behind Mr. Krabs, covered in dirt and holding a shovel. SpongeBob greets Mr. Krabs casually. Mr. Krabs screams in surprise and asks SpongeBob what he is doing there. SpongeBob explains that he was just returning the cursed soda drink hat to its original owner, Smitty Werben Jaegerman Jensen, repeating the full name that Mr. Krabs invented. Mr. Krabs grabs SpongeBob and insists there is no Smitty Werben Jaegerman Jensen because Mr. Krabs just made up that name. SpongeBob disagrees and says, sure, there is such a person. He tells Mr. Krabs that Smitty is buried out in Floater's cemetery. Mr. Krabs stammers in confusion, unable to form complete sentences as he tries to understand how this is possible. Mr. Krabs finally calms down but looks disappointed. He tells SpongeBob to give him the shovel, takes it, and walks off toward the cemetery while grumbling in frustration. SpongeBob calls after Mr. Krabs, saying it was Smitty's hat and that he was number one. The scene cuts to Floater's cemetery where eerie moaning sounds can be heard. A clam sits on a tree branch and hoots like an owl. Mr. Krabs makes a confused sound, then ducks as a bunch of clams fly over him. A black snail appears and growls at Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs screams at the snail before it slithers away. Mr. Krabs tells himself to hold himself together, reminding himself it is just a boneyard filled with bones. The cemetery gate squeaks open with a creaking sound. Mr. Krabs yells out in fear and hides behind a tombstone on a hill. He asks what that sound was and then sees Squidward. Mr. Krabs wonders what Squidward is doing at the cemetery at this hour. Mr. Krabs watches as Squidward walks up to a tombstone while crying. Squidward places flowers on the grave and then leaves. Mr. Krabs walks up to that same tombstone and reads what it says. The tombstone reads, "Here lies Squidward's hopes and dreams." Mr. Krabs calls Squidward a baby for mourning his hopes and dreams. Mr. Krabs then remembers what he came to the cemetery to do. He says he has to find Smitty What's-a-Gypster, unable to remember the full made-up name he created. Mr. Krabs starts looking at the names on different tombstones, saying nope or no to each one as he searches. The scene shows Mr. Krabs scurrying across the cemetery, checking multiple graves. The scene cuts to later with Mr. Krabs still searching. Mr. Krabs says he has checked every headstone in the cemetery and there is no Smitty Wabba Blabba buried anywhere, still unable to say the full name correctly. He tells himself to think and considers that maybe something SpongeBob said will give him some kind of clue. A thought bubble of SpongeBob appears above Mr. Krabs' head. The thought bubble SpongeBob reminds Mr. Krabs that licking doorknobs is illegal on other planets. The thought bubble disappears. Mr. Krabs yells that this was not the useful information he needs. A second thought bubble of SpongeBob appears. This thought bubble, SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs that he will never guess what SpongeBob found in his sock last night and encourages Mr. Krabs to guess. The second thought bubble disappears. Mr. Krabs repeatedly says no multiple times, frustrated that he keeps remembering useless SpongeBob quotes. A third thought bubble of SpongeBob appears. This thought bubble, SpongeBob says it was Smitty's hat and that he was number 1. Mr. Krabs punches the thought bubble away in frustration. He yells out in anger, saying he will never find the grave. At that exact moment, Mr. Krabs sees Smitty's tombstone right in front of him. The tombstone shows the full name as Smitty Werbin Man Jensen, slightly different from what Mr. Krabs said, but close enough. Mr. Krabs celebrates finding the grave. He then stops to think and asks himself if he is really going to defile this grave just for money. He immediately answers his own question, saying, "Of course he is." Mr. Krabs starts digging and hits something solid. He celebrates hitting jackpot. Mr. Krabs opens up the coffin, revealing Smitty's skeleton wearing the soda drink hat on his skull. Mr. Krabs looks at it and says it is beautiful, telling it to come to Papa. He takes the skeleton's head off with the hat still attached to it. He tells Smitty to come on and let go as he struggles to remove the hat from the skull. Mr. Krabs successfully removes the hat and tells Smitty to rest in pieces, making a pun on the phrase rest in peace. Mr. Krabs jumps out of the hole and celebrates that he has the $1 million hat. Lightning flashes and thunder booms dramatically. Smitty's skeleton stands up from his grave, holding his head in one hand since Mr. Krabs removed it from his body. Smitty speaks and says that is his hat and demands Mr. Krabs give it back. Mr. Krabs asks what and refuses, saying no way. He tells Smitty to just crawl back into his hole and calls him Bone Boy. Mr. Krabs tells Smitty to go ahead and play dead. Smitty responds that he guesses he is going to have to take the hat from Mr. Krabs by force. Mr. Krabs scoffs and asks Smitty who will help him, saying, "You and what army?" An entire skeleton zombie army surrounds Mr. Krabs, all moaning eerily. Smitty announces that he has the army of the living dead on his side. All the other dead bodies walk closer toward Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs becomes scared and says he has seen this on The Late Show, referring to horror movies. He describes what he thinks will happen, saying the ghoulish fiends will hold him down and take turns nibbling on his innards. He says they will eat his brain and leave his body for the buzzards. Smitty sounds disgusted and says that is disgusting. He clarifies that they just want the hat back, nothing more. Mr. Krabs refuses and yells that there is no flipping way he will give it back. He grabs the head of a dead swordfish and wields it as a sword. He tells the zombies to back up repeatedly. Smitty gives a simple command to his army, telling them to attack. The skeleton zombies get ready to draw their weapons. Mr. Krabs yells, "Tally-ho," and begins sword fighting a few zombies. He says to look at him and claims he is Errol Flynn, making a pun on the actor Errol Flynn, who was famous for sword fighting in movies. Mr. Krabs chops up more skeletons and mocks them by saying they are falling apart and calling one of them Marrow Brain. He tells another zombie that they must be kidding. Mr. Krabs sword fights 4 zombies who are standing on top of one another to make themselves taller. He tells them to go back to oblivion. Mr. Krabs jumps over a group of zombies and makes a sound of effort. He asks one zombie how his sister is doing while fighting. Mr. Krabs announces that playtime is over and calls them all boneheads. He makes more fighting sounds as he twirls around and destroys more of the skeleton zombies. The scene cuts to morning, showing that Mr. Krabs has been fighting all night. Mr. Krabs finishes destroying all the skeleton zombies and runs out of the cemetery with the hat held in his claws. He celebrates by yelling that he has $1 million repeatedly. Mr. Krabs runs back to his curio stand where all 4 salesfish are gathered, talking all together at once. Mr. Krabs gets their attention and says there they are. He announces that he got the hat and holds up the rare novelty soda drinking hat. He tells them they should start the bidding at $1 million. All 4 of the fish start laughing in response to Mr. Krabs' asking price. Fred asks sarcastically if Mr. Krabs wants that payment all at once, mocking the high price. The third fish says $1 million and accuses Mr. Krabs of kidding. Nat tells the others to look at this situation and says the poor sap is not kidding. Nat asks if the others heard the news. He explains that someone found a whole warehouse full of these soda-drinking hats. He says the hats are now worthless. The scene shows a bunch of soda-drinking hats filling up a dumpster. The salesfish all crack up laughing at Mr. Krabs. SpongeBob walks by wearing a different novelty hat, this one featuring clapping hands on the top of it. SpongeBob makes a pun, saying they should give Mr. Krabs a big hand as his hat claps. SpongeBob laughs at his own joke. Nat points at SpongeBob's new hat and says now that hat is worth $1 million. SpongeBob laughs again as he leaves. Nat runs after SpongeBob and the other salesfish follow. Nat yells for SpongeBob to wait up, calling him kid. The second fish says he saw SpongeBob first, trying to claim priority. The third fish announces he will give SpongeBob $1 billion. Fred rows his rowboat along the ground to follow SpongeBob and the group chasing him. Mr. Krabs looks at this scene and comments that this is a spirit breaker, meaning something that crushes his spirits and mood. He tosses the soda-drinking hat away carelessly and breaks down sobbing over his wasted effort and lost opportunity. Squidward walks by carrying flowers in his hand, presumably heading back to the cemetery to visit his hopes and dreams grave again. Squidward looks at the crying Mr. Krabs and calls him a baby, using the same insult Mr. Krabs used on him earlier. Squidward walks off as the episode ends. One Krabs Trash succeeds as one of the best SpongeBob episodes because it perfectly demonstrates the dangers of greed while delivering consistent comedy throughout. The episode takes viewers on a journey from a simple yard sale to grave robbing to fighting an army of the undead, escalating the stakes in increasingly absurd ways. Mr. Krabs serves as the perfect character to tell this story because his greed is his defining trait, and watching him go to extreme lengths for money only to lose everything creates a satisfying moral lesson. The twist ending where the hats become worthless provides perfect irony and shows viewers that obsessing over money can lead to wasted effort. The episode also features memorable moments that became iconic in SpongeBob history, particularly the character of Smitty Werbin Jaegerman Jensen and the phrase "he was number one," which fans still quote years later. The episode balances humor with surprisingly dark content like grave robbing and zombie battles, showing the range that made SpongeBob appeal to viewers of all ages. This episode demonstrates why Season 3 continued the show's creative success and why SpongeBob remained one of the most popular animated series on television during this era. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Midlife Crustacean, from Season 3 of SpongeBob SquarePants, stands as one of the show's most memorable episodes about aging and trying to stay relevant. The episode originally aired on the 24th of January 2003 and drew 4.1 million viewers in the United States. This episode explores Mr. Krabs experiencing a midlife crisis and desperately trying to prove he still has youth and energy left in him. The episode balances humor with surprisingly relatable themes about getting older and the gap between generations. The episode begins at Mr. Krabs' anchor-shaped home in the morning. Mr. Krabs wakes up in his hammock in his bedroom. His radio clicks on automatically to start his day. A radio DJ speaks, saying listeners have it tuned to KOLD, which he spells out as K-Old, describing it as an all-oldies station. The DJ says here is a little something listeners may remember from the good old days. A song starts playing with lyrics specifically about being old. The song says, "You're old," and describes groaning like a geezer. Mr. Krabs opens his eyes, which are crusty and coated in barnacles. The song continues, saying the listener feels himself cracking like an old has-been. Mr. Krabs gets out of bed with all his joints cracking audibly when he moves. The song tells the listener to look at himself because he has multiple chins. Mr. Krabs looks in his bathroom mirror and pulls down his shirt to reveal a bunch of chins hanging from his face. The song repeats that the listener is old. The scene transitions to the kitchen. Mr. Krabs slowly walks to the table and sits down as Pearl comes into the room. Pearl greets her father good morning and gives him a kiss. She tells him she made him breakfast. Mr. Krabs thanks her and calls her Sweet Pea. He observes that she got creative with the brand today. He looks down at the plate to see his brand cereal shaped to look like bacon, eggs, juice, cutlery, and a citrus slice. Pearl tells her father to open up, because it is time for the pill. Pearl takes out a giant pill and places it onto the table. Mr. Krabs says, "Oh, barnacles," and complains that he hates the pill. Pearl shoves the giant pill into his mouth and he swallows it with difficulty. He takes a breath after getting it down. Mr. Krabs asks Pearl if she thinks he is old, pausing before saying the word as if scared to hear the answer. Pearl responds that of course she thinks he is old. However, she adds that this is okay because daddies are supposed to be old. Mr. Krabs asks if he is still cool though, asking if her old man is cool. Pearl responds by explaining that no one says cool anymore, and that saying cool is such an old person thing. She tells him that now people say coral instead, explaining it as in that nose job is so coral. Mr. Krabs repeats the word coral with a questioning tone. Pearl responds with disgust, saying that when he says it, it sounds so uncoral. Mr. Krabs suggests that maybe if he said it with a different inflection, it would work better, and he tries saying coral with emphasis on different syllables. Pearl responds by asking if he has to go to work or something. Mr. Krabs realizes she is right about the time. He quickly eats his breakfast and tells Pearl to have a coral day while calling her honey. After Mr. Krabs leaves, Pearl picks up her phone and dials a number. She says, "Jenny?" It's Pearl, and then announces that coral is definitely out, meaning she is ending the use of that slang word because her father ruined it by trying to use it. The scene transitions to show Mr. Krabs walking outside. He laughs and talks to himself, questioning what he was thinking. He insists he is not old. He makes a confused sound and turns around to see a Boy Scout helping him walk across the street. The Boy Scout tells him not to worry and calls him Pops, saying they are almost across the street. Mr. Krabs tells the Boy Scout to get away from him, saying he does not need help from any snot-nosed little kid. As Mr. Krabs walks away angrily, his arm comes off his body. Mr. Krabs walks back to retrieve his fallen arm. He apologizes to the Boy Scout for him having to see that happen. Mr. Krabs keeps walking to work where a fish walks behind him. The fish, named Harold, tells Mr. Krabs to come on and move it, asking if he could possibly be any slower. Harold points out that Mr. Krabs has had his blinker on for the last 5 blocks. Mr. Krabs turns around and notices he has 2 signal arrows on his behind, with the right arrow blinking. He covers his behind with embarrassment. He continues walking until a ball rolls next to him on the ground. A child named Tyler calls out to Mr. Krabs and asks if he could throw the ball back over to them. Mr. Krabs picks up the ball and suggests that maybe he could join the kids in their game. Tyler responds that this is okay, but Mr. Krabs can keep the ball. Tyler asks why old people always have to ruin the fun. Mr. Krabs drops the ball in disappointment. He sighs as he walks up to a line of elderly fish standing together. One elderly fish talks to Mr. Krabs and accuses him of cutting in line. "The elderly fish," says Mr. Krabs has to wait his turn like everybody else. Mr. Krabs notices a long line stretching in front of the Bikini Bottom Cemetery. The sound of a church bell plays ominously. Mr. Krabs panics and yells no repeatedly. He insists he is not old like these other fish, and that he is not old. He runs away from the line in fear. Another elderly fish asks what his problem is. The scene reveals that the line is actually for ice cream and has nothing to do with the cemetery. A worker named Lou stands at the ice cream stand and calls for the next customer. The scene cuts to the Krusty Krab, where Mr. Krabs sits at a table looking depressed. A child named Monroe tells his mother that his Krabby Patty tastes funny. The mother looks at the patty and says, "Well, no wonder," explaining it is all old and dried out. She points to Mr. Krabs and says the patty is like that man right there. She tells Monroe to put that thing where it belongs, which is in the garbage. Monroe walks toward the trash can with the old Krabby Patty while singing a little song. As Monroe walks toward the trash can, Mr. Krabs grabs the patty before Monroe can throw it away. Mr. Krabs talks to the patty, saying that they are 2 of a kind because they have both lost their luster. He takes a bite out of the old patty and comments that this is what he tastes like. Patrick walks into the Krusty Krab and greets everyone by saying, "Good morning, Krusty Crew." SpongeBob pokes his head out of the kitchen window. SpongeBob shouts to ask Patrick if he is all ready for the big night out tonight. Patrick shouts back that, yeah, it is going to rock. SpongeBob asks if Patrick is ready to go crazy. Patrick responds that he is already hearing voices. SpongeBob starts to ask if Patrick is ready to do something else, but Squidward interrupts. Squidward yells at both SpongeBob and Patrick, asking if they mind keeping it down. SpongeBob suggests to Patrick that they should continue this conversation in private, because some people are eavesdropping. Patrick agrees and says how rude of some people. Mr. Krabs overhears this exchange and comments to himself that those youngsters are going out for a big night on the town. Mr. Krabs stretches his eyes like telescopes into the kitchen where SpongeBob and Patrick are talking. SpongeBob says he's been looking forward to this night all week. Patrick shouts, "Party!" SpongeBob asks what they should do first. Patrick responds by asking what they should not do first, explaining that they are young and they have wheels and the world is their oyster. Mr. Krabs' eyes move closer as Patrick talks. Patrick then notices something and tells SpongeBob he has something on his shoulder. SpongeBob looks and notices that Mr. Krabs' eyes are sitting on his shoulders. Mr. Krabs greets the boys and asks if they are hanging out. Patrick looks at his large belly hanging over his waist and says yes. Mr. Krabs says he could not help overhearing their big plans. He says he was wondering if they had room for one more crazy dude tonight. SpongeBob responds that of course they have room and asks if Mr. Krabs wants to come with them. Mr. Krabs acts as if the thought had not even crossed his mind, then quickly agrees to go. Patrick expresses doubt, telling SpongeBob that Mr. Krabs might cramp their style. SpongeBob and Patrick appear in a picture frame with silly looks on their faces when Patrick says the word style. Patrick suggests they see if Mr. Krabs knows the secret cool guy handshake. He holds out his hand toward Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs says yeah, of course he knows it, but he begins sweating nervously. Mr. Krabs makes uncertain sounds. Patrick says he is waiting and calls Mr. Krabs old man. Mr. Krabs shakes Patrick's hand in a formal way and asks, "How do you do?" Patrick responds, "Fine. And you?" and then announces that Mr. Krabs is in. However, Patrick adds that he is not happy about it. SpongeBob congratulates Mr. Krabs for passing the test. Mr. Krabs suggests that the boys show up at his house at 8 o'clock. SpongeBob warns Mr. Krabs that they are always fashionably late. The French narrator appears and narrates a time card showing 8:01 p.m. The scene cuts to Mr. Krabs' house where the doorbell rings. Mr. Krabs answers the door to find SpongeBob and Patrick standing there. SpongeBob greets Mr. Krabs and asks if he is ready to party. Mr. Krabs says he is ready to party and asks if SpongeBob is ready to party. Patrick says he is ready to party and asks if SpongeBob is ready to party. SpongeBob says he is ready to party and asks if Mr. Krabs is ready to party. Mr. Krabs says he is ready to partay, changing the pronunciation, and asks if SpongeBob is ready to partay. SpongeBob says he is ready to partay and asks if Patrick is ready to partay. Patrick says he is ready to party, going back to the original pronunciation, and asks if Mr. Krabs is ready to party. Mr. Krabs says he is ready to party and starts to ask if they are ready to par, but gets interrupted. Pearl runs by them crying in embarrassment. She yells at them to stop it and just stop it, saying they are embarrassing her. She calls Mr. Krabs dad and runs off sobbing. Mr. Krabs asks what kind of hot rod they will be cruising in tonight. SpongeBob announces that they will be using only the most powerful chick magnet in town, which he calls the Underwater Heartbreaker. A timpani drum sound plays dramatically in the background as SpongeBob, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs look at the vehicle. The vehicle turns out to be a small bike with 2 streamers on each handle. Mr. Krabs comments that it is more like a chick repellent. He points out that there are only 2 seats on the bike. SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs to calm his waters and explains that he modified this little baby himself. The scene transitions to show SpongeBob and Patrick riding at the front of the bike, while Mr. Krabs sits in a wagon being pulled behind them. Mr. Krabs asks if they are sure this is what the kids are driving these days. SpongeBob confirms that only the cool kids drive this way. A hot rod driven by a young teen fish pulls up beside them. The hot rod driver tells them they must be lost and that Doofus Drive is around the corner. SpongeBob responds that they are not lost because he has his compass. He shows the driver his compass. The hot rod driver says, "So long, dorks," and speeds away. SpongeBob waves and says, "Goodbye, pals." Mr. Krabs comments that they used to beat people up for saying things like that. He looks at the camera and says, "Everything is all topsy-turvy now." SpongeBob, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs pull up to a laundromat called The Wash. SpongeBob announces that here they are at The Wash. Mr. Krabs observes that they sure are giving these clubs some crazy names. He tells the boys he has to admit he is a little nervous because he has not been on the scene for quite a while now. SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs to just follow their lead and above all to keep it cool. Mr. Krabs repeats the word cool and says he understands. SpongeBob and Patrick walk away by jumping up and down in a silly way. Mr. Krabs copies them and does the same movements. SpongeBob opens the door and greets everyone, announcing that SpongeBob is back. Patrick shouts that they should party. Mr. Krabs starts to say something about any port in a storm, but then stops and realizes something. He says to wait a minute because this is a laundromat. The scene shows the entire room as a place for cleaning, laundry, and includes several washing machines. SpongeBob and Patrick look at their reflections in a washing machine and make excited sounds. They say, "Oh yeah," and "woo," and "that's what I'm talking about" while watching the washing machine spin. They comment on the colors they see. The washer stops, and they finish their excitement. SpongeBob asks if they want another rinse cycle and says he is buying. Mr. Krabs says that he loves staring at delicates as much as the next guy, but he thought they would see more of the nightlife. He wants something that will give them that wild and crazy hot-blooded feeling. SpongeBob says he knows what Mr. Krabs means and explains that this is only stop number 1 on their night of debauchery. Patrick repeats the word debauchery, and Mr. Krabs also repeats it. The scene cuts to the road where SpongeBob, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs are picking up trash. Mr. Krabs talks to himself about debauchery, saying he never thought of picking up trash under the highway as hot-blooded, but if it is what the kids are into, then he will go along with it. SpongeBob asks if Mr. Krabs is feeling that wild and crazy feeling. Mr. Krabs says not yet. SpongeBob tells him not to worry because he will feel it eventually. The scene cuts to all three of them sitting in a kiddie swimming pool. SpongeBob asks if Mr. Krabs is feeling it now. Mr. Krabs responds that he is feeling a warm spot in the water. Patrick apologizes, revealing he caused the warm spot. The scene cuts to them riding kiddie rides outside a store called Bargain Mart. SpongeBob asks if Mr. Krabs is feeling it now and repeats the question, asking if he is feeling it. Patrick says that he is feeling it. SpongeBob responds from off-screen, "That, Patrick, that is not a ride." The scene reveals that Patrick is riding on the back of Harold, who is pushing a grocery cart with a bag of groceries in it. Harold looks behind himself with annoyance and tells Patrick to get off of him. The episode begins what the transcript calls the Feeling It Now slideshow. The scene cuts to show SpongeBob, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs getting their teeth pulled at a dentist. SpongeBob asks if Mr. Krabs is feeling it now. The scene cuts to them redoing a roof on a house. SpongeBob asks if Mr. Krabs is feeling it now. The scene cuts to them dressed in costumes playing Dungeons & Dragons, a tabletop role-playing game. SpongeBob uses old-fashioned language and asks, "Art thou feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?" The scene cuts to them at the library. SpongeBob whispers in a half-loud, half-quiet way, asking if Mr. Krabs is feeling it now. A librarian named Miss Shell pops out and shushes them. The scene cuts to a place called Bunny Buns, which is an area for kids to play in. SpongeBob asks how about now and if Mr. Krabs can feel it. Kids in the room run around Mr. Krabs and hang on his hat streamers. Mr. Krabs has clown makeup on his face. The kids repeatedly ask if he can feel it while running around. Mr. Krabs asks if they want to know if he can feel it. SpongeBob and Patrick say yeah. Mr. Krabs asks if they really want to know if he can feel it. SpongeBob and Patrick say yeah. Mr. Krabs tells them that he can feel it and asks if they want to know what he is feeling. SpongeBob and Patrick say yes. Mr. Krabs seethes with fury and yells that he is feeling like a total barnacle head. He furiously swings the screaming kids around and around on his hat streamers before throwing them off. He yells at SpongeBob and Patrick, asking if they think this is cool. He asks how about this while punching an animatronic bunny's head off. He then jumps on top of the decapitated bunny and asks if he is with it now. He runs up to SpongeBob and Patrick and tells them they would not know a good time if it bit them in the rear end. He announces he is going home and calls them lame instead of cool. SpongeBob repeats the word lame with sadness. Mr. Krabs confirms they are lame and calls them nerds, geeks, creeps, and babies. SpongeBob and Patrick both protest that they are not babies, then immediately start sucking their thumbs like babies. Mr. Krabs admits that he may be old, but even an old bag of shells like him knows that they have not suggested one cool thing all night. He wishes them good night. Patrick mentions that Mr. Krabs is going to miss the panty raid. Mr. Krabs asks, "The what?" Patrick repeats that. He said Mr. Krabs is going to miss the panty raid. Mr. Krabs asks about a panty raid and clarifies that Patrick is talking about girls. Patrick confirms, yeah. Mr. Krabs asks if Patrick means raiding their dressers for their underpants. Patrick confirms this as well. Mr. Krabs immediately says to count him in and promises that if this works, he will take back what he said about them being lame. SpongeBob and Patrick celebrate that they are not lame. The scene cuts to the three of them carrying a ladder. Mr. Krabs says now this is more like it as he leans the ladder against a house. Patrick tells the old man to give them some credit because they are panty professionals. He climbs the ladder. SpongeBob climbs the ladder as well and brags that they score at this house all the time. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs tiptoe into a bedroom and quietly laugh to themselves. Mr. Krabs opens a drawer and observes the pairs of underwear inside. He says frilly things with excitement and grabs a pair of bloomers. He announces they hit the jackpot. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs jump up and down celebrating. SpongeBob cheers for Mr. Krabs. Patrick shouts that they did it. Mr. Krabs holds up the pair of underwear he grabbed and celebrates. He tells the boys that they finally came through for him and that he feels young again. A light turns on in the room. A voice calls out, "Eugene?" Mr. Krabs realizes with horror that the voice belongs to his mother. His mother, named Betsy, asks what he is doing with her bloomers. Mr. Krabs stammers and tries to explain while hiding his mother's bloomers behind his back. He turns around to face SpongeBob and Patrick and asks them angrily why they did not tell him this was his mother's house. SpongeBob simply asks why Mr. Krabs did not ask where they were going. SpongeBob and Patrick run away quickly. Mr. Krabs turns around to see his mother looking angry. Mr. Krabs giggles nervously while continuing to hide his mother's bloomers behind his back. He blames SpongeBob and Patrick, saying it was all their idea. Betsy tells her son to go to his room and announces that he is grounded for the rest of the night. Mr. Krabs walks away and says, "Yes, Mommy," obediently. The Boy Scout from earlier in the episode appears walking with Mr. Krabs. The Boy Scout tells Mr. Krabs not to worry and calls him Pops, saying they are almost to his room. Mr. Krabs groans in frustration. The scene transitions to Mr. Krabs' old childhood bedroom. SpongeBob peeks through the window. SpongeBob apologizes to Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs sighs and says that is all right and calls SpongeBob lad. He adds that he certainly feels younger now. The scene zooms out to reveal that Mr. Krabs is lying on his race car-shaped bed among a few childhood toys. SpongeBob wishes Mr. Krabs goodnight and leaves. Mr. Krabs says goodnight to SpongeBob. Betsy calls from outside telling Eugene that it is lights out. Mr. Krabs responds, "Yes, Mommy," and the episode ends as the light turns off. Midlife Crustacean succeeds as one of the best SpongeBob episodes because it tackles the universal theme of aging with humor while making it relatable to viewers of all ages. The episode shows Mr. Krabs going through experiences that many adults face when they realize they are getting older and feel disconnected from youth culture. Children watching can laugh at the silly activities while adults appreciate the deeper meaning about trying too hard to stay young. The episode builds perfectly toward its twist ending where the panty raid turns out to be at Mr. Krabs' own mother's house, which serves as the ultimate embarrassment and brings him full circle back to his childhood. The running gag of, "Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs?" became one of the most quoted lines from the entire series and remains popular in internet culture. The episode demonstrates why Season 3 continued the show's success by balancing absurd humor with genuine character development and relatable themes about growing older and the generational divide. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Can You Spare a Dime? From Season 3 of SpongeBob SquarePants stands as one of the show's most memorable episodes about taking advantage of friendship. The episode originally aired on the 8th of March 2002 and drew 3.65 million viewers in the United States. This episode explores what happens when Squidward quits his job after being falsely accused of theft and becomes an increasingly demanding houseguest at SpongeBob's home. The episode showcases SpongeBob's patience being pushed to its absolute limit and demonstrates the consequences of taking advantage of someone's kindness. The episode begins during nighttime at the Krusty Krab. The French narrator states that it is closing time at the restaurant. The camera cuts to show the exterior of the Krusty Krab before moving inside. Mr. Krabs stands at the cash register counting change out loud, saying 51, 52, 53, and continuing. Squidward counts his suction cups, also saying numbers out loud, including 29, 30, 31. SpongeBob mops the floor in a rhythm while counting 1, 2, 3, repeatedly in synchronization with his movements. Squidward asks Mr. Krabs if they can please go now. Mr. Krabs responds that perhaps one of their more loyal workers can enlighten Squidward on company policy. SpongeBob references the employee manual and recites a specific policy from memory. He states that the Krusty Krab Employee Manual, second revised edition, page 35, section 19, Clause 3 states that all staff must remain on the premises until the day's receipts are fully accounted for. Squidward complains that this is not fair. SpongeBob references the manual again and recites Clause 3b, which states that the proprietor reserves the right to be unfair. Squidward calls SpongeBob a teacher's pet as an insult. Mr. Krabs continues counting the money in his register, saying 5, 10, 25, blue, applesauce. He announces that everything looks to be in order. However, he pauses and gasps before asking where something is. Mr. Krabs takes apart the register while searching for something and asks again where it is with increasing desperation. Squidward asks what Mr. Krabs is looking for. Mr. Krabs explains that he cannot find his dime, specifically his special dime that was the first dime he ever made. He says he always keeps it in the back of the register for luck. Squidward responds that he has never seen this dime. Mr. Krabs glares at Squidward with suspicion. Mr. Krabs asks if Squidward is prepared to say that with his hand on a stack of interpretive dance quarterlies. He pulls out a stack of these dance magazines as he speaks. Squidward starts to say of course he is, but then makes a shocked face and asks what Mr. Krabs is saying. Mr. Krabs claims he is not saying anything that would matter to anyone who would be willing to take a lie detector test. He holds up a lie detector in his hands as he speaks. Squidward accuses Mr. Krabs of saying something. Mr. Krabs insists heavens to Betsy no, explaining that it is just that his lucky dime has gone missing, and Squidward has been working the register all day. Squidward asks angrily if Mr. Krabs is accusing him of something. Mr. Krabs says that the way he sees it, there are 3 possibilities. He lists them as 1, Squidward stole it, 2, Squidward stole it, or 3, Squidward stole it. Squidward responds with rage that he did not take Mr. Krabs' precious dime. Mr. Krabs tells Squidward to show him his tentacles. Squidward asks what Mr. Krabs means. Mr. Krabs clarifies that he wants to see empty suction cups on Squidward's tentacles to prove he does not have the dime. Squidward silently rages, holding his fists and shaking with anger. Squidward then squeezes Mr. Krabs' eyes with his tentacles in anger while saying "here" repeatedly and asking if Mr. Krabs can see his empty tentacles. Squidward then stomps away angrily. Mr. Krabs says that Squidward cannot do that to him because Mr. Krabs is his boss. Squidward announces that Mr. Krabs is not his boss anymore because Squidward quits. He throws his hat down on the floor. The hat falls in slow motion. SpongeBob gasps and says no, while catching the hat with a pillow to protect it. Squidward announces that he is leaving. SpongeBob tells Squidward that he is making a big mistake. Squidward repeats the word mistake with a laugh and says the only mistake he ever made was wasting his life at the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob argues that a visit to the Krusty Krab makes everyone happy, and he asks what could be better than serving up smiles. SpongeBob smiles really big as he says this. Squidward responds that being dead would be better, or anything else for that matter. SpongeBob says he never knew Squidward felt so strongly about leaving. Squidward asks where SpongeBob has been all this time. SpongeBob admits he guesses he cannot stop Squidward from leaving. However, SpongeBob warns Squidward that it is a cold, cold world out there, and no one is going to serve him happiness on a silver platter. Suddenly, a fish appears holding cookies on a silver platter and offers SpongeBob a free sample. SpongeBob gets excited about cookies, takes one, and eats it. Squidward asks if he can have one, but realizes the fish has already disappeared. SpongeBob continues his goodbye speech, saying that anyway, he just wants Squidward to know that if he ever gets in trouble, Squidward should come find SpongeBob because SpongeBob will take care of him. SpongeBob explains that he and Squidward are like brothers, only closer. SpongeBob grabs Squidward and pulls him toward himself. SpongeBob then lifts Squidward's shirt to reveal that their hearts are somehow joined together and beating in unison. Creepy alien music plays before Squidward screams and leaps away from SpongeBob in horror. Squidward tells SpongeBob that he does not need his help. Squidward says he is ready to unlock his potential and could become anything he sets his mind to. Squidward imagines himself in various future jobs. He says he could be a football player, or a king, or a spaceman. SpongeBob suggests Squidward could be a football-playing king in space with a mustache, combining all the ideas. Squidward narrows his eyes at this suggestion and says yeah in a sarcastic tone. Squidward says that reminds him there is something he has been wanting to say to SpongeBob since the day they met. He simply says goodbye. Squidward declares that the next time SpongeBob sees him, the town will be eating out of the palm of his hand. The scene cuts to show a homeless Squidward living in a cardboard box and trying to get spare change from people passing by. Squidward holds out a cup and asks various people for spare change. SpongeBob suddenly appears and asks if that is Squidward. SpongeBob calls out Squidward's name repeatedly with excitement. Squidward makes uncertain sounds and closes his cardboard box. SpongeBob opens the box back up and says it is him, SpongeBob, explaining they used to work together. Squidward repeats SpongeBob's name with recognition. SpongeBob makes a cheerful sound and asks where Squidward is living these days. A delivery fish approaches and asks if he is speaking to Squidward tentacles. Squidward confirms yes. The fish tells Squidward to sign something. Squidward signs the paper and the fish takes away his cardboard box. Squidward answers SpongeBob's question by saying he is living nowhere. SpongeBob responds that this is great and asks what Squidward has been doing with himself. SpongeBob stops himself and says to wait, let him guess instead. SpongeBob observes that he sees Squidward has been working on a mustache and notices the tattered clothes and awful smell. SpongeBob guesses that Squidward is a football player. Squidward says no. SpongeBob guesses a spaceman. Squidward says no again. SpongeBob guesses a football-playing king in space. Squidward asks if SpongeBob gets it yet and starts sobbing. He cries that he is a loser and has lost his job, his home, and everything. SpongeBob gasps and asks if Squidward lost even his paintings. Squidward explains that nobody would take them, so he had to eat them. His stomach is shown to have a rectangular shape from the eaten painting. Squidward starts crying a fountain of tears directly into SpongeBob. SpongeBob soaks up the water and becomes bigger, but then squishes himself to let the water out. SpongeBob comforts Squidward by saying there, and tells Squidward he can come live with him. The scene transitions to SpongeBob's house. SpongeBob tells Squidward to sleep in his bed. Squidward is shown laying in SpongeBob's bed. Squidward says okay, but clarifies this is just until he gets a job, which will be 1 day or 2 days tops. SpongeBob uses baby talk and says nonsense, telling Squidward to stay as long as he needs to. SpongeBob kisses Squidward on his nose and wishes him good night, calling him his little angel. The next morning, SpongeBob rings a bell to wake Squidward. SpongeBob announces that breakfast is ready and explains that Squidward will need to build up his strength again, so SpongeBob laid out a big buffet for him. Squidward notices the food is being served in bed too and thanks SpongeBob. SpongeBob shushes Squidward repeatedly and says, "Here comes the plane." He makes plane noises while attempting to put a spoonful of porridge in Squidward's mouth. Squidward says it is really nice of SpongeBob to help him in his time of need. He swallows the porridge and promises to try not to be a burden. SpongeBob says it is no trouble and asks if there is anything else he can do for Squidward, calling him winner. Squidward starts to say no and that SpongeBob has already done enough, but trails off. A montage shows SpongeBob pampering Squidward in various ways. SpongeBob puts lotion on his hand and massages Squidward's scalp, feeds him grapes, massages his tentacle, sprays his scalp with hairspray and wipes it, massages his back, then his nose, gives him a baby bottle to drink from, wipes his scalp once more, gives him an acupuncture treatment, and finally polishes his head before smiling at his reflection in it. SpongeBob comments that nurturing a broken spirit is a lot of work. He throws a blanket upward, and it lands on him as he lies on the sofa. SpongeBob says he is bushed, meaning very tired. Still, he adds that it feels nice to do good. He turns the lamp off and yawns before wishing Gary good night. Squidward calls out asking if SpongeBob can get him a glass of water. The bottom floor light turns on and SpongeBob marches upstairs and turns on the light to give Squidward the water. Squidward thanks him. SpongeBob says good night and marches back downstairs before turning off the light. Squidward calls out again, asking if SpongeBob could get him some more blankets. SpongeBob marches upstairs again while turning on the lights on the way up. SpongeBob gives Squidward more blankets. Squidward thanks him. SpongeBob goes downstairs again but accidentally leaves Squidward's light on. Squidward calls out that SpongeBob forgot to turn out the light. SpongeBob marches upstairs once more. He says good night and turns off the light. When he walks downstairs, he trips and makes lots of crashing noises. Gary makes a sound that the transcript describes as apathetic. SpongeBob gasps in resentment and anger. He yells at Gary that Squidward is not a freeloader and would never take advantage of him. The French narrator appears and reads a time card saying 3 weeks later. SpongeBob looks exhausted and says that Squidward is just having a hard time getting his confidence back. SpongeBob falls down on his face. The French narrator reads another time card saying many months later. SpongeBob looks even more exhausted with baggy eyes. Gary looks tired as well. SpongeBob says he is sure Squidward is close to a breakthrough and falls down on his face again. A British narrator appears and reads a third time card. The narrator says so much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one. SpongeBob drags himself into the room, by now utterly exhausted. Gary looks unsympathetic. Gary meows 3 times in what the transcript describes as a reproachful tone. SpongeBob responds with annoyance that he knows Squidward still is not looking for work and tells Gary not to rub it in. Squidward calls out asking where his lemonade is. SpongeBob responds with further annoyance that it is coming and calls out Squidward's name. He falls flat on his face once more. The scene shows SpongeBob running down the hallway as Squidward calls his name repeatedly. SpongeBob enters the bedroom. Squidward asks why SpongeBob is not in uniform. SpongeBob exits the room and re-enters wearing a maid outfit. Squidward comments that it is about time SpongeBob got there. SpongeBob says, sardonically, "Here you go, your majesty," as he hands over the lemonade. Squidward announces that he cannot drink it. SpongeBob asks why not. Squidward asks if SpongeBob is blind and tells him to just look at the drink. A close-up shows the lemonade. SpongeBob becomes irritated and asks what about it. Squidward points out that the lemon has 3 seeds in it, which is an odd number, and declares he cannot eat anything odd-numbered. SpongeBob says fine and offers to just take the lemon out. He takes out the lemon and Squidward goes crazy. Squidward yells no repeatedly and says the drink is already contaminated by the bad lemon and that it will not work now. SpongeBob responds with annoyance that there are 2 things in this house that will not work, referring to both Squidward and the lemonade. Squidward tells SpongeBob to go fix them both. SpongeBob grips the glass of lemonade so hard that it shatters in his hand. He repeats his line about 2 things that will not work while clenching his fists and trembling in anger. Squidward announces he has changed his mind and wants soup instead. SpongeBob says okay and tells Squidward not to move. SpongeBob walks out the bedroom door, and the scene reveals his white underwear showing because his maid outfit does not cover his back. He closes the door and comes back in wearing normal clothes while holding a bowl of steaming soup. SpongeBob says here it is and explains it is alphabet soup. He says frustratedly that he made it special. The soup is shown to have the phrase, "get a job," spelled out in alphabet letters. Squidward slaps the soup out of SpongeBob's hands. Squidward exclaims in anger that condensed soup from a can is disgusting. He says that now SpongeBob has ruined his appetite. Squidward demands that SpongeBob go fetch him something to read. SpongeBob says okay and asks, "How about this?" He pulls out a newspaper with the job listings page on the front. Squidward gasps and swats the newspaper away. The transcript notes that SpongeBob becomes even more angry at this. Squidward tells SpongeBob to get the newspaper away from him and says he is allergic to newsprint. SpongeBob makes a laughing sound, but in an angry way. He tells Squidward that when he swatted that newspaper out of his hands, it reminded SpongeBob of something a friend of his did at his job. SpongeBob's alarm clock suddenly blows him away with a loud noise. Squidward looks at the time and says it is 4 o'clock, meaning it is time for his stories, referring to television shows. He tells SpongeBob to hurry up because the shows will not wait while SpongeBob lazes around. SpongeBob rolls in a television and hands Squidward the remote control. Squidward turns on the TV, which has a crayon background. The screen shows 2 puppets. One is a green puppet representing Squidward, and the other is a yellow puppet wearing a shirt and tie similar to SpongeBob. The first puppet asks where the second puppet is going. The second puppet responds that it is going to its job. The first puppet asks if the second puppet has a job. The second puppet asks why it would not have a job, saying it is not some lazy, inconsiderate jerk who lays in bed all day. The first puppet asks where it can get one of these jobs. The second puppet says jobs are everywhere, especially if you are green and have 6 tentacles. The camera moves back to show SpongeBob is making the voices and controlling both puppets. The first puppet thanks the second and says it is going to go look for a job so it can stop mooching off its friends and they can get back to their lives. Squidward observes that this is not his show. He presses the remote control button, but nothing happens. Squidward yells that the remote control is broken and demands SpongeBob come over and fix it. SpongeBob is now finally fed up with everything. He says he has a better idea and throws off the TV before jumping on top of Squidward in bed. SpongeBob yells that he could call someone whose job it is to fix things. He asks Squidward if he knows why, then explains that when he needs a job done, he gets someone with a job to do that job. SpongeBob pokes Squidward's nose 4 times while saying this, emphasizing the word job repeatedly. Squidward narrows his eyelids and asks what SpongeBob is saying. This turns out to be the last straw for SpongeBob. The scene shows it is daytime outside. SpongeBob's house jumps into the air before the side is smashed out. A furious SpongeBob pushes the bed with Squidward still in it outside and toward the Krusty Krab while screaming in total fury. Mr. Krabs is shown talking on his phone inside the Krusty Krab. He asks why he should donate to the Children's Fund, and questions what children have ever done for him. SpongeBob suddenly appears and furiously grabs the phone and throws it away. SpongeBob asks furiously if Mr. Krabs wants his dime back. He takes out a dime and tells Mr. Krabs to take it, asking if now Squidward can come back to work. Mr. Krabs checks the dime through a telescope. Mr. Krabs says wrong and throws the dime at SpongeBob's face. He declares that is not his first dime. SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs to have some more dimes and throws out more dimes at Mr. Krabs' face. Mr. Krabs narrows his eyes at this. SpongeBob yells that he has plenty of dimes. Mr. Krabs insists you cannot put a price on his first dime and says he cannot forgive that thieving bilge rat Squidward for stealing it. SpongeBob finally snaps in extreme rage and fury. He grabs Mr. Krabs by the throat and holds him up in the air violently. SpongeBob yells that Squidward has been living at his house and driving him crazy. He shakes Mr. Krabs violently with wide open and bloodshot eyes while screaming furiously. Cowbells can be heard in the background during this scene. SpongeBob screams that Mr. Krabs is not going to hire Squidward back all because of a stupid dime. A giant prehistoric-looking dime falls out of Mr. Krabs' back pocket. SpongeBob suddenly calms down and lets go of Mr. Krabs. He asks what that is. Mr. Krabs gasps and identifies it as his first dime. He hugs the dime and tells it he will never lose it again. SpongeBob asks if this is a dime, because it looks so different from modern dimes. Mr. Krabs responds flatly and skeptically that he has been in business a long time. SpongeBob asks if Squidward never stole the dime, then he can come back to work. Mr. Krabs confirms yes and calls SpongeBob lad. He asks SpongeBob to just let him and the dime have their privacy. Mr. Krabs kisses the dime. SpongeBob cheers and runs off celebrating. The final scene shows Mr. Krabs at the counter telling Squidward it is good to have him back. Squidward responds that it is kind of good to be back and calls Mr. Krabs sir. Mr. Krabs says it is all water under the bridge now. Squidward agrees. Mr. Krabs adds that, after all, he is sure Squidward did not mean to misplace his dime. Squidward asks what Mr. Krabs is saying. Mr. Krabs explains that it is obvious Squidward put the dime in his pants because dimes just do not fly into people's pants on their own. Squidward asks if Mr. Krabs is accusing him of something. SpongeBob notices that Squidward and Mr. Krabs are arguing again. He puts the maid costume back on over his clothes, ready for what will happen next. Mr. Krabs says that the way he sees it, there are 3 possibilities. The scene moves outside the Krusty Krab as Mr. Krabs lists 1. Squidward put the dime in his pants. 2. Squidward put the dime in his pants. Or 3. Squidward put the dime in his pants. The episode ends with the cycle about to repeat. Can you spare a dime? Succeeds as one of the best SpongeBob episodes because it explores the limits of friendship and hospitality with both humor and surprising intensity. The episode shows how even the most patient person has a breaking point when someone takes advantage of their kindness. The increasingly absurd demands Squidward makes test SpongeBob's patience in ways that viewers find both funny and relatable. The time cards, showing weeks and months passing, became iconic in internet culture, particularly the British narrator's line about the old narrator getting tired of waiting. SpongeBob's final explosion of rage stands as one of his most intense moments in the entire series, and shows that even his endless optimism has limits. The circular ending where Mr. Krabs and Squidward immediately start arguing again suggests the pattern will repeat, adding dark comedy to the conclusion. This episode demonstrates why Season 3 maintained the show's quality by balancing character-driven humor with situations that push characters to their absolute limits. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we got the camping episode from Season 3 of SpongeBob SquarePants stands as one of the show's most beloved and quotable episodes. The episode originally aired on the 3rd of April, 2004, and drew 5.4 million viewers in the United States, making it one of the most watched episodes of Season 3. This episode introduces the concept of the sea bear and creates some of the most memorable moments in the entire series, including the famous campfire song and the absurd list of things that attract sea bears. The episode demonstrates the show's ability to build comedy through escalating absurdity while creating mythology that fans still reference years later. The episode begins at nightfall at Squidward's house. Squidward is preparing for bedtime and looks forward to a relaxing evening. Squidward enters his bedroom wearing a nightgown while carrying a book and a cup of tea. He sighs with relief and announces that finally, the weekend is here. He adds that this is not just any old weekend while gesturing to a dance quarterly calendar on his wall. He explains this is the weekend SpongeBob and Patrick go camping. Squidward asks himself if it would not be great if they got lost in the woods and never came back. A thought bubble appears over Squidward's head, showing his imagination. In Squidward's thought, SpongeBob is hiking with Patrick and both have camping gear strapped to their backs. An owl hoots in the background. SpongeBob and Patrick look worried in this imagined scenario. The imaginary SpongeBob tells Patrick that he is scared. Squidward's thought bubble disappears. Squidward laughs and says that would be great. He jumps into bed and tells himself that he has waited a long time for this moment. He lists what he has planned, which includes a soft bed, warm tea, a good book, and 2 whole days with no SpongeBob around. As he says this, Squidward laughs just like SpongeBob and imitates his goofy, big-eyed face. However, Squidward then hears SpongeBob's real laugh coming from outside. Squidward says, "What the?" with confusion and goes outside to investigate. He finds SpongeBob and Patrick in a tent that is complete with sleeping bags. The two are reading books and laughing together. Squidward asks SpongeBob if they are not supposed to be camping. SpongeBob responds that they are camping. Squidward points out that it is not camping if they are 10 feet from SpongeBob's house. The camera zooms out to show the tent's location, which is indeed very close to SpongeBob's pineapple house. SpongeBob responds that it does not matter where you are as long as you are outdoors. He explains that while all those soft city folk are safe in their beds reading books, he and Patrick are out here pitting themselves against the formidable forces of nature. SpongeBob asks if Squidward wants to join them. Squidward says no. SpongeBob says okay and tells Squidward to have fun inside. Squidward leaves and SpongeBob and Patrick pull their book back out along with a flashlight. They begin to read and giggle together. Squidward suddenly pops back into the tent while glaring at them. He asks what SpongeBob means by have fun inside. SpongeBob simply repeats that Squidward should have fun inside and says he will see him tomorrow. Squidward says oh and bye before leaving. Squidward exits and SpongeBob and Patrick resume reading. Squidward enters the tent again and gasps dramatically. Squidward accuses SpongeBob of being a little sneak and says he can see what SpongeBob is doing. SpongeBob asks what Squidward means. Squidward tells SpongeBob not to think he cannot see what SpongeBob is doing. SpongeBob asks what again. Squidward accuses SpongeBob of saying Squidward cannot take it. SpongeBob starts to say that all he was trying to do, but Squidward interrupts. Squidward holds up a tentacle and makes a sound to cut SpongeBob off. He accuses SpongeBob of saying Squidward is soft. Squidward says SpongeBob thinks his little have fun inside challenge is going to make Squidward come camping with them, but that is never going to happen. Squidward declares there is no way he is going to sit out here all night with 2 losers. He tells them to get used to it and exits the tent. SpongeBob says okay and tells Squidward to have fun inside. Squidward pokes his head back into the tent and blows SpongeBob and Patrick back with his loud voice. He announces that is it, and he is in, declaring he will show them camping. Squidward runs into his house. SpongeBob tells Patrick that Squidward is going to come camping with them. Both SpongeBob and Patrick climb out of the tent and giggle with excitement. Squidward emerges from his house with a large camping backpack. He starts to say that now they will see how a real outdoorsman does it, but he falls face forward on the ground, squished by the immense weight of the backpack. He finishes his sentence while on the ground, then climbs out from underneath the heavy backpack. Squidward pulls a pouch from the backpack and announces this is his remote-controlled, self-assembling tent. He tells them to watch and learn. SpongeBob takes out binoculars to observe, while Patrick gets a notepad and a pair of half-moon glasses to take notes. Squidward tosses the pouch into the air and presses the remote control. However, the power fizzles and the tent appears unassembled in a pile on the ground rather than assembled like it should. SpongeBob comments that was great and asks Squidward how you get inside. Patrick agrees and says yeah, noting it looks all crushy. Squidward responds that it is not put up yet and calls them idiots. He grumbles while picking up the tent and fiddling around with it. Squidward accidentally rips the tent. SpongeBob, still acting like he and Patrick are taking notes, calls this customization. Patrick agrees and calls Squidward a genius. Squidward beats on the tent with a wooden stick while making angry sounds. SpongeBob interprets this as tenderizing the ground. Patrick says, of course, as if this makes perfect sense. SpongeBob tells Patrick to write that down twice for emphasis. Patrick still appears to be taking notes, but the scene reveals there is just a tic-tac-toe game in progress on his notepad instead of actual notes. Squidward continues struggling with the tent. He gives the pile a huge kick and it automatically becomes an assembled tent. Squidward says, voila, with satisfaction. However, the perfect tent immediately collapses back to pile form. Squidward pushes the failed tent out of the way and announces that what could compare to just lying out under the stars. He takes a lone blanket and places it on the ground to sleep on. SpongeBob and Patrick applaud and cheer wildly and vigorously at this decision. Squidward says he has worked up an appetite as big as all outdoors and announces it is time for a little grub, which means food. He supposes that SpongeBob and Patrick are going to stew up some twigs and rocks. SpongeBob laughs and says nope, explaining they have something even better, which is marshmallows. He pulls out a bag with the brand name Marsh King on it and pops a marshmallow into his mouth. SpongeBob makes a sound of enjoyment and says it is just like what the astronauts eat. Patrick has a round fishbowl over his head like the helmet of an astronaut suit. He imitates static noise and says Patrick to SpongeBob twice, asking if SpongeBob can read him and adding over at the end like radio communication. SpongeBob also has a helmet made from a fishbowl. He imitates static noise and says SpongeBob to Patrick and confirms he can read Patrick, ending with over. Patrick says with static that he likes going, ending with over. SpongeBob responds with static that he likes it too, ending with over. Patrick and SpongeBob start to repeatedly exchange static noises back and forth. Squidward looks annoyed at this behavior. SpongeBob tells Patrick with static to help himself and holds out the Marsh King bag. Patrick says yummy and takes a marshmallow, cramming it into his mouth so hard that he smashes his helmet. Patrick announces that the deliciousness has landed. Squidward says that while the two astronauts can eat marshmallows, he is going to have a can of Swedish barnacle balls. He holds up the can closely to show its full label. Squidward adds that he will eat these just as soon as he can get his can opener. SpongeBob asks Squidward if he did not take a can opener when he hiked out here. Squidward asks why he would bother since they are 10 feet from his house. SpongeBob points out that this is the wilderness and it just does not seem to fit the camping spirit. Patrick calls Squidward pretty weenie, which is slang for calling someone weak. Squidward gives in and says alright twice before asking for a marshmallow. Squidward begins toasting his marshmallow lightly over the fire. Patrick sits across from him and sets his marshmallow on fire. Patrick tries to blow on it to cool it down, but the marshmallow flies off and hits Squidward in the face. Patrick gets another marshmallow and repeats the same thing twice. After 2 marshmallows hit him in the face, Squidward ducks down. He laughs at successfully dodging the attack. However, the third marshmallow has a boomerang effect and hits Squidward in the back of the head. Squidward asks what else they do for fun besides spitting molten foodstuffs at him. SpongeBob explains that after a long day of camping, it is nice to unwind with a nice, relaxing campfire song. He says he calls this one the Campfire Song Song. SpongeBob begins singing while playing a ukulele. He sings Let's Gather Around the Campfire and Sing Our Campfire Song, our CAMPFIRESONG song. And if you don't think that we can sing it faster, then you're wrong. But it'll help if you just sing along. Patrick joins in by singing bum 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 as a background part. Both SpongeBob and Patrick sing together, with Patrick slightly behind SpongeBob in the words. They spell out CAMPFIRESONG song twice. SpongeBob repeats the verse about singing it faster while Patrick briefly sings sing another song at the same time. SpongeBob spells out the song name again and then calls out Patrick. Patrick sings song, CAMPFIRE, but gets cut off. SpongeBob calls out Squidward, and there is silence from Squidward. SpongeBob says good, and finishes the song by singing it'll help if you just sing along. SpongeBob smashes his ukulele like a guitar at the end of a rock show. Patrick does the same with his drum set. SpongeBob sings, "Oh yeah," and then asks if that was not relaxing. Squidward responds with a firm no. He says this is relaxing and holds up his clarinet. Squidward begins playing Kumbaya, but he plays it awfully. SpongeBob and Patrick look alarmed at the terrible sound. SpongeBob yells, "Oh no," and picks up a marshmallow, holding it into a slingshot. He announces he will save Squidward. SpongeBob slingshots the marshmallow at Squidward, and it goes up his clarinet before sticking in the back of his throat. SpongeBob comes over to assist Squidward. SpongeBob asks if Squidward is all right, and tells him to chew and swallow. SpongeBob then asks if Squidward feels better. Squidward asks better with anger in his voice. He says he was just fine until SpongeBob launched that ballistic junk food into his windpipe. SpongeBob insists he had to do it because it is too dangerous to play the clarinet badly out here in the wilderness. SpongeBob whispers that bad clarinet playing might attract a sea bear. Squidward repeats a sea bear in a low, cautious tone. He starts to ask if SpongeBob means like the ones that, but then switches to an angry tone and finishes by saying the ones that do not exist. SpongeBob asks what Squidward is saying. Squidward insists there is no such thing and that sea bears are just a myth. SpongeBob says oh no and insists that sea bears are all too real. He says it says so in the Bikini Bottom Inquirer and holds up a cheesy tabloid newspaper. Squidward reads the cover story out loud, which says, "I married a sea bear" as a question. Patrick agrees and adds that it also says so in Fake Science Monthly, holding up another newspaper. Squidward reads this one out loud as well, which says, "Sea bears and fairy tales are real." Squidward calls this the stupidest thing he has ever heard. Patrick says, well, maybe it is stupid, but it is also dumb. SpongeBob agrees that Patrick is right and that sea bears are no laughing matter. SpongeBob begins telling a story about how he once met this guy, who knew this guy, who knew this guy, and he continues saying, who knew this guy over and over many times, until finally ending with, who knew this guy's cousin. Squidward interrupts by saying SpongeBob is right, and that he should be more careful. Squidward suggests that SpongeBob should tell him all the things he should not do if he wants to keep the sea bears away, clearly being sarcastic. SpongeBob says, okay, and that this is easy. First off, Squidward should not play the clarinet. Squidward says, okay, and asks what else. SpongeBob says, never wave your flashlight back and forth really fast. Patrick adds that flashlights are the sea bear's natural prey. Squidward asks if they are kidding. SpongeBob continues the list by saying not to stomp around because sea bears take that as a challenge. Patrick agrees. Squidward writes on a notepad and tells them to go on. SpongeBob says, do not ever eat cheese. Squidward asks if this means sliced or cubed cheese. SpongeBob whispers with Patrick and then announces that cubed cheese is the problem but sliced is fine. Squidward says yeah twice and asks what else. SpongeBob says never wear a sombrero. Patrick adds that especially you should not wear it in a goofy fashion. SpongeBob adds or clown shoes to the list. Patrick adds or a hoop skirt. SpongeBob and Patrick both say never and ever multiple times, before both saying to never screech, like a chimpanzee. Squidward responds with false amazement at how many things can set a sea bear off. Both SpongeBob and Patrick huddle together while shuddering and saying sea bears are horrible. Squidward says he suddenly has the sense they are all in danger. SpongeBob and Patrick both ask why. Squidward says he does not know and that it is just a feeling. He runs off and returns with a flashlight, clown shoes, hoop skirt, sombrero, and tray full of cubed cheese. A diabolical look is on his face. SpongeBob says no with horror. Squidward says yes. SpongeBob says no again with more emphasis. Squidward begins making chimpanzee noises. SpongeBob and Patrick both beg Squidward to please not do this. Squidward continues hooting, stomping, and waving his flashlight around while making chimpanzee sounds. Patrick asks SpongeBob what they are going to do because a sea bear is sure to come and eat them. SpongeBob tells Patrick not to worry and says he will draw them an anti-sea bear circle in the dirt. He takes a stick and draws a circle around himself and Patrick. Squidward continues to screech like a chimpanzee while doing all the things that supposedly attract sea bears. Patrick says good thinking and holds up another issue of Fake Science Monthly. Patrick explains that all the experts say the circle is the only defense against a sea bear attack. Squidward ends his screeching and starts laughing at them. He calls them so gullible and points out that he did everything that attracts a sea bear and nothing happened. Squidward asks if sea bears really exist, then why did one not show up? SpongeBob suggests, maybe it is because Squidward is not wearing his sombrero in a goofy fashion. Squidward apologizes sarcastically and says how silly of him. He asks if SpongeBob means like this while tilting his sombrero to the right and laughing. However, something off-screen takes the hat and turns it upside down instead. The camera zooms out to show an angry sea bear that inverted Squidward's sombrero. The sea bear looks like a giant fish with the head of a bear and claws on its fins. SpongeBob clarifies that he meant like that, referring to how the sea bear positioned the hat. Squidward sees the growling sea bear and screams when it roars at him. The sea bear chases Squidward while he runs away. It begins to maul Squidward off-screen while SpongeBob and Patrick remain huddled safely inside their anti-sea bear circle. SpongeBob asks if Squidward is okay. Squidward responds no, while looking bruised and battered. SpongeBob tells Squidward to quickly jump inside their anti-sea bear circle before the bear comes back. Patrick brings the anti-sea bear circle and drops it at his and SpongeBob's current position. Patrick adds that sea bears often attack more than once. Squidward asks if they are crazy and says a dirt circle will not stop that monster. He announces he is running for his life. SpongeBob and Patrick both yell no. The sea bear rushes back and attacks Squidward again. SpongeBob yells at Squidward not to run because sea bears hate that. Squidward thanks SpongeBob for the tip and says sarcastically that he guesses he will just limp home then. SpongeBob and Patrick both yell no again. The sea bear returns a third time and attacks Squidward once more. SpongeBob explains that sea bears hate limping more than running. Squidward starts to say that he guesses he will just have to do something else, but the sea bear attacks him for the fourth time before he can finish. SpongeBob says he should have warned Squidward about crawling. The sea bear attacks Squidward yet again for a fifth time. Squidward asks what he did that time. SpongeBob says he does not know and guesses the sea bear just does not like Squidward. Patrick suggests Squidward should pretend to be somebody else. SpongeBob tells Squidward to draw a circle and tosses him the stick. Squidward says okay. However, the sea bear attacks Squidward anyway. SpongeBob points out that was an oval and that it has to be a circle. Squidward runs and climbs on top of SpongeBob and Patrick, who are still sitting in the circle. He tells them to move over. The sea bear comes up to Squidward in the circle, then notices the circle itself on the ground. The sea bear snarls and points a threatening claw at Squidward before leaving them alone. Squidward says, hey, it worked, and tells SpongeBob and Patrick that they saved his life. All three of them celebrate together by saying hooray. SpongeBob says he is glad it was just a sea bear because this circle would never hold back a sea rhinoceros. Squidward asks what attracts sea rhinoceroses. Patrick explains that the sound of a sea bear attack attracts them. A sea rhinoceros appears, making snorting sounds. SpongeBob says it is a good thing they are all wearing their anti-sea rhinoceros undergarments. He adds right, Squidward, at the end. Squidward responds with a confused, huh, sound as the episode ends, implying he is not wearing the protective undergarments and is about to be attacked. The camping episode succeeds as one of the best SpongeBob episodes because it perfectly demonstrates the show's ability to create absurd mythology and escalate situations to ridiculous extremes. The episode starts with a simple camping scenario and builds to introducing an entirely new creature with increasingly ridiculous rules about what attracts it. The list of things that attract sea bears became one of the most quoted parts of the entire series, with fans still referencing the cubed cheese rule and the goofy sombrero fashion years after the episode aired. The Campfire Song became one of the most iconic songs from the show and demonstrated the series' musical creativity. Squidward's role as the skeptic who gets proven wrong in the most painful way possible creates satisfying comedy for viewers who enjoy seeing his arrogance punished. The twist ending with the sea rhinoceros adds one final layer of absurdity and suggests Squidward is about to suffer even more. This episode demonstrates why Season 3 maintained SpongeBob's quality by combining creative world-building with character-driven humor and perfectly timed escalation that keeps viewers engaged from start to finish. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Squilliam returns from Season 3 of SpongeBob SquarePants, stands as one of the show's most beloved episodes about competition and pretending to be something you are not. The episode originally aired on the 15th of March 2002, and drew 4.78 million viewers in the United States. This episode introduces Squilliam Fancyson, Squidward's wealthy and successful rival from high school, and shows Squidward desperately trying to prove he has achieved success in his life. The episode features the iconic brain sequence showing SpongeBob's thoughts as tiny workers and includes some of the most quotable moments in the entire series. The episode begins at the Krusty Krab, where Squidward looks at his watch. He counts down from 10 to 1 while SpongeBob mops the floor nearby. When Squidward reaches 1, he announces to Mr. Krabs that he is done with his shift. Squidward declares that there will come a day when he will make something of his life and will never have to set foot in this grease trap again. As Squidward makes this dramatic speech, real-life footage of a cheering crowd in black and white appears behind him for effect. Mr. Krabs responds from off-screen that they will see Squidward after his lunch break. The real-life footage crowd disappears. Squidward simply says okay and walks out of the Krusty Krab. Outside, a fancy-looking octopus named Squilliam talks to a group of people. Squilliam explains that he just took his private yacht across his private lake to his private heliport, saying it is the only way off his private island. Squidward sees this and gasps before saying, "Oh, shrimp!" Squidward recognizes him as his arch-rival from high school, Squilliam Fancison. Squidward says he cannot let Squilliam see him in his Krusty Krab uniform. Squidward takes off his Krusty Krab employee hat and hastily tries to put it in the trash can. However, right as he lifts up the lid to put it in the trash can, Squilliam and his group arrive in front of him. Squilliam asks if Squidward is on his lunch break, calling him Squiddy. Squidward responds yes, then says no, then makes uncertain sounds before asking what Squilliam has been up to. Squilliam responds that he has just been succeeding in everything Squidward has failed in. Squidward insists that Squilliam is no great shakes and that anyone can be a big shot in a hick town like Bikini Bottom. Squilliam responds by saying, "Oh, is that so?" and suggests they hear what Squidward has accomplished since high school. Squidward thinks to himself not to be intimidated and to try to imagine Squilliam in his underwear. Squidward imagines Squilliam as a hot underwear model with the muscular body of a human. Squidward thinks to himself, "Oh no, he's hot." Squidward tells Squilliam out loud that he is in food service. Squilliam tells Squidward to hold on and says not to tell him. Squilliam guesses that Squidward is a cashier and laughs. His group laughs with him. Squidward thinks to himself not to lie because lying always makes it worse. However, Squidward tells Squilliam out loud that he owns a 5-star restaurant. Squilliam and the crowd gasp at this news. Squilliam says he had no idea Squidward was such a success. Squidward confirms that is right. Squilliam says he would be honored if Squidward would allow him to come to his restaurant. Squidward looks confident at this statement. However, Squilliam adds the word "tonight" at the end. A dramatic sting plays along with the sound of glass breaking. Squidward's mouth becomes tiny. His eyes become big with pupils that shrink. Red lines appear, and his nose shrivels up in an expression of extreme shock. Squidward stutters the word "tonight" with terror. Squilliam says that in fact, they will all come and that his treat will pay for everything. Squilliam's group cheers at this announcement. The scene cuts to the Krusty Krab with Squidward in Mr. Krabs' office. Squidward begs Mr. Krabs to help him. He explains that when Squilliam and his group get there tonight, they are going to see that Squidward is just a big phony and a loser. Mr. Krabs responds with a mocking boo-hoo and says he will play a sad song for Squidward on the world's smallest violin. Mr. Krabs rubs his fingers together and sad violin music plays. Squidward insists this is serious. Mr. Krabs agrees that he knows it is serious and claims this really is the world's smallest violin. The scene shows a tiny violin being played. Squidward yells Mr. Krabs' name with frustration. He begs Mr. Krabs to please let him run the restaurant for just one night, saying he really needs to impress Squilliam. Mr. Krabs stutters the name Squilliam with recognition. Squilliam's unibrow appears floating above Mr. Krabs' head. Mr. Krabs asks if this is that guy who made millions doing what Squidward wishes he could do. Squidward tells Mr. Krabs not to rub it in. Mr. Krabs asks why Squidward did not tell him about this earlier and says they will take Squilliam to the cleaners. The scene cuts to show SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs standing in a straight line like soldiers. Squidward walks back and forth in front of them wearing a white tuxedo. Squidward tells them to listen up and addresses them as men. He explains that Squilliam Fancison will be there in 20 minutes. Therefore, they need to turn the Krusty Krab into a fancy restaurant as soon as possible. Patrick suddenly appears next to SpongeBob with an army hat on his head. Squidward asks Patrick what he is doing there. Patrick explains that he thought the corpse would help him straighten out his life and calls Squidward Sir. Squidward asks what Core Patrick is talking about and realizes Patrick thinks this is something it is not. Squidward sighs and says beggars cannot be choosers. He asks Patrick if he can take hats in a dignified and sophisticated manner. Patrick asks if Squidward means like a weenie and says okay. Patrick talks in an exaggerated weenie voice and repeatedly asks if he may take someone's hat. Squidward puts his hand over Patrick's mouth and says he has heard enough. Squidward tells Patrick he has got the job and walks away. Squidward asks Mr. Krabs if he once served on the S. Gourmet. Mr. Krabs responds with an enthusiastic aye aye aye. Squidward announces that Mr. Krabs will be their chef. Mr. Krabs walks off to prepare. SpongeBob asks what he can do to help. Squidward says he cannot believe he is saying this, but SpongeBob is going to have to be the waiter. SpongeBob asks what that is. Squidward explains it is the guy who goes to tables and takes orders. SpongeBob asks if other restaurants do that. Squidward confirms yes, they do that. Squidward tells SpongeBob to listen because Squilliam is on his way, and SpongeBob has less than 20 minutes to become a fancy waiter. Squidward hands SpongeBob a book labeled How to Become a Fancy Waiter in Less Than 20 Minutes. SpongeBob reads the title of the book out loud. He tells Squidward not to worry because he will memorize every page right down to the punctuation marks. Squidward says he has all the positions filled, and he just might pull this off. Patrick is shown shaking a coat rack with a hat on it, yelling at it to give him the hat. Patrick asks if the coat rack is going to hand it over or not, and tells it not to backsass him. Patrick jumps on the coat rack and starts punching it. Squidward reassures himself that Patrick is just the hat check guy, and nothing essential. An explosion is heard in the kitchen. A bunch of green goop flies out of the kitchen and lands on Squidward. Squidward asks what happened and what it is. Mr. Krabs announces it is peas and explains he made them the old-fashioned way. A can of peas that is still in the can sits on the stove while on fire. Squidward tells Mr. Krabs he has to take them out of the can, but gasps before he can finish. He says holy fish paste and asks what something is. Squidward notices a giant goop pile of food on the grill with flies and other things sticking out of it. Mr. Krabs announces that is the appetizer. Squidward says he thought Mr. Krabs said he was the head chef on the S. S? Gourmet. Mr. Krabs asks if he said that, and then says no. Mr. Krabs clarifies that he cleaned the bathrooms on the Gourmet and was the head chef on the S. S. Diarrhea. Squidward walks out of the kitchen in distress. Squidward says there SpongeBob is and tells him he has to help. Squidward walks over to SpongeBob and explains that Patrick and Mr. Krabs are not working out and Squilliam is almost there. Squidward calls SpongeBob's name as a question. He turns SpongeBob around to face him. SpongeBob now looks like a zombie and appears tired from reading all the pages of the book about being a fancy waiter. SpongeBob says he cannot do it repeatedly. Squidward asks what SpongeBob means. SpongeBob says every sentence and every paragraph is too much. He slams the book on his face between each word as he lists spoons, bread, salad, and pepper. SpongeBob asks if Squidward understands. His brain starts to swell visibly. SpongeBob explains that his brain is full to bursting, and if he has to memorize a single order, he thinks he is going to explode. SpongeBob then explodes and turns back to normal. Squidward tells SpongeBob to hold on and suggests they just take a second to relax. SpongeBob lowers his arms. Squidward tells him to lower them a little more. SpongeBob lowers his arms more. Squidward says little more again. SpongeBob's face falls to the floor. Squidward says good. He tells SpongeBob that he wants him to empty his mind. SpongeBob repeats, empty my mind, as a question. Squidward confirms he should empty his mind. SpongeBob repeats this again. Squidward tells SpongeBob to empty his mind of everything that does not have to do with fine dining. He adds that SpongeBob should only focus on fine dining and breathing. The scene zooms inside SpongeBob's head and then into his brain. Inside his brain, a bunch of mini-brain SpongeBob employees are working on computers in an office setting. An office manager runs to the front of the office. This supervisor announces they just got an order from the boss to dump everything that is not about fine dining. The other mini-brain SpongeBobs ask if he means everything. The supervisor confirms everything. Every mini-brain SpongeBob starts to panic and begins throwing everything away. The supervisor tells them to come on repeatedly and to bring everything. Another mini-brain SpongeBob shreds some papers marked jellyfishing, then papers marked childhood memories, then papers marked Spice Garden tips. The supervisor tells everyone to keep going and to keep doing it. He walks toward another mini-brain SpongeBob, telling them to get moving. He talks to one mini-brain SpongeBob and tells him to hurry up, asking what he thinks he is paying him for. This mini-brain SpongeBob responds that the supervisor does not pay him and that they do not even exist. The mini SpongeBob explains they are just a clever visual metaphor used to personify the abstract concept of thought. The supervisor warns that one more crack like that and he is out of there. The mini-brain SpongeBob begs no and says he has 3 kids. More dumping continues. One mini-brain SpongeBob drops papers from a box named Math into the bin. Another mini-brain SpongeBob shovels papers into a furnace. Another mini-brain SpongeBob flushes some papers down the toilet. The entire office is full of messy flying papers with mini-brain SpongeBobs dumping papers throughout. The scene cuts back to SpongeBob, who now has a blank look on his face. Squidward asks how SpongeBob feels. The camera cuts to SpongeBob still, with a blank face. Squidward says SpongeBob's name as a question and snaps his tentacles. SpongeBob drools. Squidward says this is not working. Patrick is shown walking on all fours with the coat rack in his mouth. Squidward says he has to go tell Squilliam that he needs more time. He runs out the door saying he will just go to Squilliam's house. However, Squidward stops when he sees Squilliam and the group outside the Krusty Krab's front doors. Squidward says Squilliam's name and notes that he is already here. Squilliam greets Squidward by saying hello and calling him Squiddy. Squidward steps back nervously. Squilliam announces they are all ready to be dazzled by Squidward's 5-star restaurant. Squidward tells Squilliam to wait because he has to explain something. Squilliam asks, "Explain what?" He continues by asking if Squidward is trying to explain that he, Squidward Tentacles, who was voted most likely to suck eggs in high school, is trying to pass off a lousy burger stand as a 5-star restaurant. Squilliam walks inside while saying this. However, when he looks around, he gulps with surprise. The interior of the restaurant looks very professional, with nice wallpaper, a small orchestra, a chandelier, and other fancy decorations. Squilliam starts stammering by saying homina repeatedly. Squidward joins in chanting homina as well. The group comes in and starts to chant homina together. SpongeBob comes in wearing a tuxedo and a mustache. SpongeBob asks if this is a table for homina, mishearing their stammering as a name. He says he can seat them immediately and picks up Squilliam and his entire group with one hand. Squidward whispers to SpongeBob asking how he did all this. SpongeBob responds that it was easy once he cleared his mind. Squidward asks, what about Mr. Krabs and Patrick? SpongeBob says they are taken care of. The scene shows Mr. Krabs and Patrick tied up and gagged in the back of the restaurant. SpongeBob tells the guests to come right this way. SpongeBob seats everyone quickly. Squilliam is seated without a chair at first, but SpongeBob then rushes back to give him a chair to sit on. SpongeBob greets Squilliam good evening and calls him sir. He gives Squilliam a menu. SpongeBob recommends the Krabby Newburg from the menu tonight. SpongeBob gives Squilliam a shoulder massage as he takes away his menu. As SpongeBob quickly explains what Squilliam is eating, he gives him a napkin to put on his neck and feeds him the dinner. SpongeBob continues making Squilliam's experience the best possible by treating him like royalty and doing all sorts of things. SpongeBob uses a knife and fork to cut the roast and feeds Squilliam each piece, sprays cologne on his head, wipes his head with a tissue, and brushes his hair. While doing all this, SpongeBob describes the meal. He explains they take the finest cuts of aged, imported kelp, stuff them with herbs from their garden, wrap them in parchment with their award-winning shallot tapenade, slow roast them for 6 hours in their wood-fired, clay-filled oven called a kiva, and serve them with a garnish of wilted coral on a mahogany plank. Squilliam says this is fantastic. SpongeBob salutes with all 6 hands that helped him serve Squilliam and thanks him. Squidward tells SpongeBob to pinch him because he must be dreaming. SpongeBob pinches Squidward with a pin. Squidward yells ow in pain. SpongeBob tells Squidward that if he needs anything else, just call. Squidward tells SpongeBob he cannot thank him enough for all he is doing. SpongeBob responds that fine dining and breathing are all he knows how to do. He takes a deep breath and runs off. Squidward says to himself that it worked and he cannot believe it. He notes that Squilliam thinks Squidward owns a 5-star restaurant and says it is time to rub it in his face. Squidward walks up to SpongeBob and Squilliam where SpongeBob is combing Squilliam's unibrow. Squidward tells Squilliam he is waiting to hear an admission from him. Squilliam's eyes tear up. He admits that everything is fabulous, including the food and the atmosphere. Squilliam says everything is flawless. Squidward says in that case, he needs Squilliam to read something. He hands Squilliam a card. Squilliam starts to read it out loud, beginning with Squidward Tentacles. Squidward puts a foam finger with the words "Hey Shown Squid" on Squilliam's left hand and tells him he needs to wear this. Squilliam continues reading that Squidward Tentacles has the fanciest. Squidward puts a microphone in front of Squilliam and says sorry, asking him to say it one more time. Squilliam reads over a loudspeaker system in the restaurant that Squidward Tentacles has the fanciest restaurant in Bikini Bottom and he does not suck eggs. Every customer in the restaurant cheers at this announcement. Squilliam tells Squidward he must tell him something. SpongeBob pours more water in Squilliam's glass, and Squilliam drinks it. Squilliam thanks SpongeBob. Squilliam says what really won him over was Squidward's brilliant waiter. He observes that it is as if all SpongeBob knows is fine dining and breathing. Squilliam tells SpongeBob he must know his name. The sound effect of a record scratch plays. SpongeBob repeats, "My name," as a question. Squilliam confirms yes, asking for his name and calling him son. SpongeBob guesses Beef Wellington as a potential answer. Squilliam chuckles and says no, asking for his actual name. SpongeBob guesses the fork on the left as another answer. Squidward laughs nervously and tells SpongeBob to stop joking and tell Squilliam his name. SpongeBob repeats "my name" again. The scene zooms inside SpongeBob's brain again, where all the mini-brain SpongeBobs are trying to search for a name. One mini-brain SpongeBob checks file cabinets while asking what his name is and saying he has nothing on a name. Another mini-brain SpongeBob presses a key on a keyboard connected to a computer, asking for the name. The computer bursts into flames. Panicked shouting is heard from other mini-brain SpongeBobs as they run wildly around while papers fly everywhere. One mini-brain SpongeBob yells that they threw out his name. More mini-brain SpongeBobs begin running around while more papers fly. SpongeBob's brain then breaks in half. The scene cuts back to Squilliam and Squidward, with SpongeBob stammering for a moment. SpongeBob then splashes water on Squilliam and starts barking and going wild. Squidward says he is so very sorry and says he does not know what has gotten into SpongeBob. Squidward screams in shock as he notices SpongeBob with a bowl of hot soup standing by a customer named Fred. SpongeBob asks if Fred wants more soup for his armpits. He holds up Fred's arm and throws the soup on his armpits. Fred screams in pain. SpongeBob runs over to a customer named Martha and grabs her head. He tells her to please enjoy the food and slams her face into her food. SpongeBob then runs up to a customer named Nat and asks if he would like some cheese on his food. SpongeBob pulls out a cheese grater, picks up Nat, and grates his butt with it as Nat screams. Every fish in the restaurant screams and panics. Squidward looks frightened and says no repeatedly. Patrick, still tied up, runs out of the kitchen while screaming. Mr. Krabs, also still tied up, runs out of the kitchen as well. Mr. Krabs warns everyone to run for their lives because it is the appetizer. The appetizer, which has now come to life, bursts through the door and roars. Mr. Krabs is sent flying by the impact. The appetizer crawls outward, revealing its face to the camera. Everyone screams and panics. They crash through the windows and the door while running away. Squidward's tuxedo rips in half by itself and falls off. His Krusty Krab hat and name tag land on him in their proper places. The name tag reads, Squidward Tentacles, Cashier. Squilliam says well and asks what Squidward has to say now, saying he is waiting. Squidward's eyes tear up. He admits that he is a fraud. He says this was all a futile, pathetic attempt to impress Squilliam. Squidward admits this is not really his restaurant and he is just a cashier. Squilliam says he understands and that he has a confession to make himself. Squilliam claims he made everything up about his life and has no yachts, jets, or anything. He says he was only trying to impress Squidward. Squilliam says the horrible, sad truth is that he is a cashier too. He starts to cry while Mr. Krabs plays the world's smallest violin. Squidward asks if that is true. Squilliam responds, of course not, and announces he is filthy, stinking rich. He tells everyone to come on because they are all going to take a ride in his balloon/casino. Everyone in his group cheers and follows Squilliam out. The wallpaper in the Krusty Krab rips off, revealing the normal interior. Squidward sits down and sighs at his failure. SpongeBob walks by with a bag of ice on his head. He says he has such a headache and asks what is going on with Squidward. Squidward responds, oh, the usual. Mr. Krabs slides over and plays the world's smallest violin once more. The scene cuts to outside the Krusty Krab as the world's smallest violin continues playing. Squidward is furious and annoyed off-screen. He yells angrily, asking if Mr. Krabs would get out of there. The episode fades to black and ends. Squilliam Returns succeeds as one of the best SpongeBob episodes because it perfectly captures the feeling of trying to impress someone who seems more successful than you and having everything fall apart spectacularly. The episode features one of the most creative sequences in the entire series, with the brain office showing SpongeBob's thoughts as tiny workers, which became iconic in SpongeBob history. The concept of SpongeBob emptying his mind so completely that he forgets his own name creates both comedy and tension. The episode also introduces Squilliam Fancyson, who became one of the most memorable recurring characters in the series, despite only appearing in a few episodes. The running gag of Mr. Krabs playing the world's smallest violin became one of the most quoted moments from the entire show and is still referenced in internet culture. The episode demonstrates why Season 3 maintained SpongeBob's quality by combining clever visual humor, creative storytelling, character-driven comedy, and a satisfying structure that builds to an appropriately chaotic conclusion. Squidward's humiliation feels earned because his lie created the entire situation, while SpongeBob's brief moment of perfection, before his mental breakdown, showcases the show's ability to push characters to absurd extremes for comedic effect. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to, the Fry Cook Games from Season 2 of SpongeBob SquarePants stands as one of the show's most memorable episodes about friendship and competition. The episode originally aired on the 28th of September, 2001, and drew 2.54 million viewers in the United States. This episode parodies the Olympic Games by creating a fast food-themed competition where fry cooks compete in various cooking-related athletic events. The The episode showcases SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship being tested when they become competitors representing rival restaurants, building to one of the most iconic endings in the entire series. The episode begins outside of the fast food coliseum. A realistic fish head announcer welcomes sports fans to the 21st annual Bikini Bottom Fry Cook Games. Horns play as Harold, a blue-spotted fish, runs into the stadium while holding a small torch. He runs up the stairs toward a huge hamburger. Harold declares these fry cook games open. However, a gust of wind blows by and puts out the flame on the torch. The scene cuts to a please stand by screen. The screen cuts back to the stadium as the horns blow again. Harold runs back into the stadium, but this time he shields the torch with his hand while panting from exhaustion. He runs back up the stairs to the huge hamburger. Harold declares these fry cook games open again and lights the huge hamburger on fire. A second later, Harold himself catches fire and burns. The realistic fish head announcer says that the 21st fry cook games have begun. He introduces himself as a realistic fish head and notes it is a beautiful day at Bikini Bottom's fast food coliseum. A clip plays showing a woman tossing a large straw into a large plastic cup like a javelin. The announcer explains that competitors come from everywhere microwaves hum. A clip shows a fish throwing an uncooked patty onto a grill like a discus throw. The announcer continues that they come from where patties sizzle. A clip shows a fish bouncing on top of a large cube of gelatin and landing on a mat. The announcer adds that they come from where heat lamps keep the fast food spirit warm and soggy. However, the announcer explains that the real story is the bitter rivalry between former competitors Mr. Krabs of the Krusty Krab and Plankton of the Chum Bucket. Pictures of both Mr. Krabs and Plankton appear on screen. A clip shows Mr. Krabs lifting up 2 barrels of pickles like lifting dumbbells. The announcer asks, who could forget the year Mr. Krabs won gold for the 500 pickle clean and jerk event? Mr. Krabs is shown standing on a podium on the number 1 step while Plankton stands below him on the 2nd place step. The announcer notes that Plankton did not forget this moment. The clip shows Plankton spraying Mr. Krabs with a hose in revenge. Another clip shows Plankton flipping around while hanging onto 2 onion rings. The announcer describes when Plankton won the hearts of millions by performing a perfect onion ring routine with a broken antenna. Plankton is shown raising up and down while holding the onion rings. As he tries to stretch downward, he makes moaning sounds of pain. A cast is wrapped around Plankton's left antenna. Plankton is shown in the number 1 spot on the podium, this time with Mr. Krabs below him in 2nd place. The announcer notes that Mr. Krabs was not moved by this performance. Mr. Krabs blows Plankton off the podium. The announcer says that now, late word is that this year the Krusty Krab will be represented by a new competitor on what is perhaps the greatest day of his young life. As the announcer speaks, a picture of a shadowy figure of a body with a question mark over it appears on screen. The figure turns around and is revealed to be SpongeBob wearing a sweatband and sports uniform. SpongeBob stands next to Mr. Krabs, who sits on a bench staring at a stopwatch. SpongeBob repeats exactly what the announcer just said, declaring this is perhaps the greatest day of his young life. SpongeBob starts jogging in place. He says he cannot believe he is representing the Krusty Krab in the Fry Cook Games. A spotlight shines down on SpongeBob, and he puts his hand on his heart. SpongeBob declares that to bring home the gold is to bring honor and glory to the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs adds that all that free publicity will bring in customers, so SpongeBob should not lose. Mr. Krabs walks away. SpongeBob responds with, I, Mr. Krabs, and starts doing push-ups. SpongeBob chants, Krusty Krab, repeatedly while exercising. Patrick walks up and greets SpongeBob. SpongeBob stops exercising to say hi to Patrick. SpongeBob continues doing push-ups while chanting Krusty Krab repeatedly. SpongeBob starts groaning from the effort. Patrick asks if SpongeBob is trying to move the ground and says he will never move it like that. Patrick explains that SpongeBob has to get underneath it. Patrick rips the piece of grass out from under SpongeBob, flipping him over. SpongeBob tells Patrick to come on because he is trying to train for the games. Patrick asks what games and if he can play. SpongeBob says sorry to Patrick. SpongeBob starts jumping rope. He explains to Patrick that you have to be a fry cook to compete. Patrick asks if being a fry cook is all he has to do and says that will be easy. SpongeBob tosses his jump rope behind him and asks what Patrick means by easy. Patrick scoffs at the question. Patrick asks how hard being a fry cook can be. SpongeBob responds that they do not let just anybody be a fry cook and says they are an elite corps. Patrick dismisses this and says they are just flipping patties. SpongeBob insists that flipping is not as easy as it sounds. Patrick flips a rock over with his foot and makes a dismissive sound. SpongeBob tells Patrick he should go home and suggests Patrick can compete in the laying under a rock all day games. Patrick gasps with offense. Patrick says that at least he does not polish his fingernails. SpongeBob gasps and points at Patrick. He tells Patrick to take that back. SpongeBob's index finger gleams in the light. Patrick dances around while chanting fingernails 3 times. SpongeBob points out that Patrick does not even have fingernails. Patrick says he cannot believe what he is hearing. SpongeBob shouts, asking how Patrick can hear it when Patrick does not have ears either. Patrick stutters with anger. Patrick starts chanting holes repeatedly, referring to the holes on the side of SpongeBob's body. SpongeBob calls Patrick a cone head. Patrick calls SpongeBob yellow. SpongeBob calls Patrick pink. Patrick screams and holds his head. He announces he is going to get a job as a fry cook and it will be easy. Patrick walks off. SpongeBob growls and starts doing push-ups again, but this time he does them faster. SpongeBob says fine and continues chanting Krusty Krab repeatedly. Mr. Krab sniffs the air and asks what that smell is. Mr. Krab sniffs suspiciously and says he smells Plankton. The camera zooms over to Plankton, who stands in the entranceway of the stadium. Plankton pulls out a human nose from behind him. Plankton responds, "Oh yeah," and says he smells something too. He sniffs himself and says the word pew before agreeing that Mr. Krabs is right. Plankton throws the nose away. Mr. Krabs runs over with his feet twinkling. Plankton does the same. Mr. Krabs makes a Broadway pose as corresponding music plays. Plankton makes a similar pose while holding a cane and a top hat. Mr. Krabs plays a piano while Plankton blows into a tuba, messing up the rhythm. Plankton says he loves messing things up. Plankton meets up with Mr. Krabs by getting on a small platform and pulling a lever, which raises him up to Mr. Krabs' height. Plankton asks if Mr. Krabs is ready to do or die. Mr. Krabs responds that he is always ready. Plankton says good, because today the chum bucket is going to kick Mr. Krabs' carapace. However, as Plankton speaks, he raises his arm and accidentally whacks the lever, causing him to lower again. He raises himself back up to finish his sentence. Mr. Krabs says that is what Plankton thinks, but Mr. Krabs has got himself a champion. Mr. Krabs calls for SpongeBob to show Plankton what he can do. SpongeBob does a karate routine using 2 spatulas as nunchucks, then giggles innocently when he finishes. Mr. Krabs tells Plankton to look at SpongeBob and says he is in his prime. Mr. Krabs declares that Plankton has no chance. Plankton says that is where Mr. Krabs is wrong because Plankton also has a champion. Plankton lowers a microphone and addresses the crowd. He tells ladies and gentlemen to turn their attention to the southwest corridor. The crowd turns to the southeast corridor instead. Plankton tells them to go the other way and says imbeciles under his breath. The crowd turns to the southwest corridor. Plankton tells them to stop and says perfect. In the entranceway, an extremely large shadow approaches while making loud stomping sounds. Plankton describes the approaching creature as fearsome, terrible, and mind-bendingly large. 2 parents cover up their child's eyes in fear, and the child covers theirs. Mr. Krabs' eyes and nose sink into his shell with fear. Plankton warns that those with weak constitutions may want to leave the stadium. A muscular fish sits trembling in the audience. He quickly gets up to try to leave while saying he has to get out of here. Plankton announces it is too late. He says, "Ready or not, here the creature comes." Plankton tells everyone to quake with fear and bow down before the awesome might of someone. The wall of the stadium explodes. Fish fly everywhere. When the dust clears, a huge purple muscular fish is seen standing in the opening. Plankton finishes his sentence by saying, "This huge guy who is carrying the real contestant." The huge fish turns around, revealing Patrick to be strapped to his back. Plankton announces the real contestant is Patrick Star. Patrick waves happily. SpongeBob stares in shock. He walks up as Patrick gets down from the huge fish's back. SpongeBob asks Patrick what he is doing there and points out that Patrick is not a fry cook. Patrick insists that yes, he is, and calls SpongeBob Mr. SpongeBob Superior Pants. Patrick tells SpongeBob to check it out and lifts up his shirt. A name tag is stuck to Patrick's chest that says, "The Chum Bucket, Patrick." Patrick explains he has been working for the Chum Bucket for almost 5 minutes. SpongeBob responds that it does not matter anyway because Patrick is going to eat his dust. Patrick responds not and says he is eating his own dust. SpongeBob says not if he eats it first. Patrick calls SpongeBob yellow. SpongeBob calls Patrick pink. The two walk away from each other. SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs he cannot believe it because he thought Patrick was his friend. Mr. Krabs asks about friend and says not in here Patrick is not SpongeBob's friend. SpongeBob asks what Mr. Krabs means. Plankton tells Patrick that SpongeBob is not really his friend. Patrick asks if SpongeBob is not his friend. Plankton says SpongeBob is plotting Patrick's downfall right now. SpongeBob asks if he is plotting Patrick's downfall. Mr. Krabs says SpongeBob is going to stab Patrick in the back. Patrick says SpongeBob would not do that. Plankton insists that of course SpongeBob would and tells Patrick to just look at him. Looking from Plankton's point of view, Plankton uses his fingers to frame SpongeBob. Plankton says, "Square the shape of evil." Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob that Patrick is making a mockery of his profession. Mr. Krabs asks if they are going to let some pretender take away what belongs to the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob says no. Plankton tells Patrick to get mean. Patrick announces he is mean. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to get angry. SpongeBob announces he is angry. Plankton tells Patrick to now get out there. Mr. Krabs continues by saying, "and win." Plankton adds that. Mr. Krabs finishes with metal. Patrick screams. SpongeBob screams. Both SpongeBob and Patrick scream at the same time. The huge fish makes a weak scream and says, "ah." The scene cuts to the first event. The realistic fish head announcer announces their first event is the deep fry pole vault. A deep fryer labeled Fry King sits in front of two high poles. SpongeBob stands in front of Mr. Krabs while holding a long pole. Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob to win this one for the Krusty Krab. SpongeBob repeats, "for the Krusty Krab." SpongeBob flips over the poles in the deep fry and splats down on the circle drawn in the ground. The crowd gasps. SpongeBob forms a #1 sign with his body and the crowd cheers. Plankton tells Patrick to win this one because Plankton told him to. Patrick repeats, "because you told me to." Patrick flips over the poles but lands on the handle of the deep fryer. This flings the fryer at the crowd and turns them into fish sticks. A vendor walks up and turns on a heat lamp. The vendor named Lou announces, "Fish sticks. Get your fish sticks here." The scene cuts to the second event. SpongeBob and Patrick stand in front of a tall ladder that leads to a diving board perched above a bowl of chocolate syrup. The announcer announces the next event is the chocolate high dive. SpongeBob tells Patrick to make way for the real fry cook. SpongeBob climbs up the ladder. The announcer explains that for his dive, SpongeBob will be attempting a full banana fudge pop with 2 sticks. SpongeBob holds up 2 popsicle sticks and sticks them into the top of his head. The announcer requests absolute silence. The crowd stops chattering. SpongeBob jumps off the diving board while yelling, "Ice cream for ice cream." SpongeBob flips around a couple times, then leaps toward the bowl. He lands in the chocolate syrup, getting coated in it, then hops out of it and into a sandbox full of toasted almonds. The announcer comments on the perfect entry and notes that toasted almonds are unexpected. SpongeBob lands in the circle on the ground. The announcer says SpongeBob stuck the landing. SpongeBob turns around toward the camera and grins. The announcer tells everyone to look at that even coating. SpongeBob walks upside down past Patrick using the popsicle sticks for legs. SpongeBob tells Patrick to top that and calls him Pinky. Plankton walks up and expresses frustration about the almonds. He says, "Curse him, that's good," but suggests it is perhaps a bit too highbrow for this crowd. Plankton tells Patrick that SpongeBob thinks he is better than the crowd. Patrick groans. Plankton adds that SpongeBob thinks he is better than Patrick. Patrick groans louder. Plankton tells Patrick to get up there and show SpongeBob how the common man prepares his frozen dairy treats. Patrick screams, then hops up onto the diving board with the lower half of his body inside an ice cream cone. The announcer explains that Patrick will be resurrecting an old favorite, the single scoop strawberry cone with a chocolate dip. Patrick slowly leans off the edge until he falls off the diving board. The announcer comments to look at that concentration. Patrick splashes into the bowl with chocolate syrup flying everywhere. The announcer says the entry was a little shaky. A live-action strawberry cone with a chocolate dip is shown on screen. The announcer tells everyone to look at that form. Patrick hops up to SpongeBob while grinning. SpongeBob looks very angry about losing. Patrick tells SpongeBob to take that and calls him Yellow Boy. SpongeBob tells Patrick to laugh while he can and calls him Pinky. SpongeBob says it is not over yet. Patrick says that is what SpongeBob thinks, but it is not over yet. A clip of highlights from the games is shown. The clip begins with SpongeBob tossing a patty. Patrick skates on a large grill with butter on his feet. Patrick tosses a large bottle of ketchup up in the air. SpongeBob and Patrick race on a track while carrying trays full of food. The two fly up in the air on 2 large spatulas. They both do a dance, wearing colorful outfits and fruit hats, with Patrick wearing 12 pieces of fruit and SpongeBob wearing 27 pieces. The clip ends. A large arena on top of a hamburger appears on screen. The realistic fish head announcer is still reporting. The announcer says it is not over yet. He explains that with the score tied, they go to their final event, which is bun wrestling. The announcer asks who will take home the gold, Mr. Krabs of the Krusty Krab or Plankton of the Chum Bucket. Mr. Krabs rubs SpongeBob's shoulders and tells him not to forget that Patrick called him yellow. SpongeBob picks up a metal chain, bites off and chews up the middle of it. He bares his teeth, revealing the metal chain to now be attached to them like braces. The announcer asks if it will be Plankton of the Chum Bucket. Plankton tells Patrick not to forget that SpongeBob called him Pink. Plankton hops away. Patrick growls as he picks up a lemon, rips it in half, puts both halves into each of his eyes and screams. Heavy metal music plays. The bell rings. SpongeBob tears off his blue robe. His body swells up to 3 times his height, showing off his extremely large, muscular body. Patrick rips off his own green robe, underneath which he wears a business suit. He tears off the business suit, also swelling up and revealing an extremely large, muscular body. The two dive at each other while screaming until they collide. They wrestle and continue to wind up in twisted positions. They spin around and wind up wrestling with themselves. They realize this mistake and dive back at each other. Patrick sits on top of SpongeBob while holding his foot. Patrick announces that he should forget the chum bucket because this is personal. Patrick takes off SpongeBob's shoe and licks his foot slowly. SpongeBob screams in agony. The two wrestle again. SpongeBob sits on Patrick's chest and screams as he lifts up a pencil with the eraser side pointing toward Patrick. He slowly brings it down to Patrick's name tag and erases the Pat in Patrick, leaving only Rick. Patrick screams no, and then yells out that his name is not Rick. Patrick tackles SpongeBob in a puff of smoke, and the two wrestle once more before they stop fighting. SpongeBob says he does not like Patrick. Patrick says he does not like SpongeBob more. SpongeBob says he never liked Patrick. Patrick says he 1,000 times never liked SpongeBob. SpongeBob calls Patrick pink. Patrick calls SpongeBob yellow. They struggle to push each other for almost 5 seconds until they hear both of their pants ripping. This causes them to stop immediately. Their pants fall down as the crowd gasps. Patrick's underwear is yellow, and SpongeBob's underwear is pink. SpongeBob gasps and says yellow as a question. Patrick gasps and says pink as a question. Their eyes start to water with emotion. SpongeBob and Patrick both say together, "You do care." They both start crying and hug each other. SpongeBob stops crying and smiles. He suggests they promise never to fight again and calls Patrick buddy. Patrick agrees and calls SpongeBob pal. Patrick suggests they go home. The two friends walk off while whistling and holding hands. The crowd boos at them for not finishing the match. Mr. Krabs runs up and asks where they are going. Plankton runs up next to Mr. Krabs. Plankton tells them to get back there and kill each other. SpongeBob and Patrick exit the stadium with arms on each other's backs. Patrick tells SpongeBob that he is his best friend ever. SpongeBob says the same to Patrick. Patrick adds that his underwear was white when he bought it, explaining why it is now yellow. The episode ends with the two friends walking away together. The Fry Cook Games succeeds as one of the best SpongeBob episodes because it perfectly combines sports parody with genuine emotional stakes about friendship. The episode creates an elaborate fast food Olympics complete with creative events that parody real Olympic competitions while remaining true to the show's restaurant setting. The chocolate high dive and deep fry pole vault demonstrate the writer's creativity in adapting athletic events to fit the show's world. The escalating rivalry between SpongeBob and Patrick builds naturally from a simple argument about the difficulty of being a fry cook to genuine anger fueled by Mr. Krabs and Plankton's manipulation. The muscular transformation during the wrestling match became one of the most iconic visual moments in SpongeBob history and is still referenced in internet culture. The twist ending, where their matching colored underwear reveals they care about each other, provides a perfect resolution that reinforces the show's core message about friendship. The final line about Patrick's underwear being white when he bought it adds a perfectly timed joke that ends the episode on a light note. This episode demonstrates why Season 2 is considered part of SpongeBob's golden age by balancing elaborate world building, creative visual humor, character-driven conflict, and heartfelt resolution into a cohesive story that entertains viewers of all ages while never losing sight of the genuine friendship at its core. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.